You can stop sharing stuff.
I did. Wait and see. Rebecca, so. Sure. Yep.
All right, you are recording.
Okay, good morning, everybody. All right, good morning, my name is Tom Lang, and I am the Texas Parks and Wildlife Inland Fisheries Division's Outreach Director, and with that, I get to serve as Director of the Texas Freshwater Fisheries Center. So let me first start by welcoming you to the big bass capital of the world, the Texas Freshwater Fisheries Center right here in Athens, America. So I want to talk a little bit about the Fisheries Center and give you a little bit of a frame of reference on that. But first, I'd like to provide a welcome that our Division Director, Tim Birdsong, has written up, detailing some of the history of our division, our department with NIFHAP and other partnerships. So on behalf of Tim Birdsong, Inland Fisheries Division Director, the division was an early advocate and supporter of the National Fish Habitat Action Plan and fish habitat partnerships, playing active leadership roles in the steering committees and science teams of the Reservoir Fish Habitat Partnership, Desert Fish Habitat Partnership, and Southeast Aquatic Resources Partnership. Division contributions have included engagement of the Texas U.S. Congressional Delegation to support passage of the National Fish Habitat Conservation Act through the ACE Act, co-authoring of the 2012 NIFHAP, SART, and Reservoir Fish Habitat Partnership strategic plans, co-authoring of the 2015 National Fish Habitat Assessment, and delivery of nearly 100 NIFHAP supported fish habitat projects through 2022, which has been recognized through over a dozen national and international awards. From 2008 to 2022, 84 fish habitat projects were supported in Texas through $1.226 million in funding between Reservoir Partnership, SART, Desert Fish Habitat Partnership, and Beyond the Pond. Funding has been leveraged at least 1-to-1 by the division and local partners. Those 84 projects resulted in the restoration, enhancement, and protection of more than 26,000 acres of fish habitats and the creeks, rivers, and reservoirs listed below, 8 of which were recognized as NIFHAP waters to watch, including Lake Houston, Conroe, Livingston, Lake Wichita, Rio Grande, Balmaria Springs, and the Blanco and Llano rivers. So I think I'm going to spare going into the details of each of those projects, but I think it was wonderful that Tim would take a moment just to reflect on the scope of our division's engagement in the Reservoir Fish Habitat Project, our partnership in NIFHAP. We are committed to the cause, and we're so grateful to be able to welcome each of you all here to Texas today. So, all right. Feel free to clap, it's okay. Or laugh, that's fine. So, icebreaker. So I want to talk a little bit about the Texas Freshwater Fisheries Center. This is a 106-acre facility. It is one of 5 working freshwater fish hatcheries owned and operated by the Inland Fisheries Division. But it's also our lone visitor center. It was built in 1996 and was actually the first project conducted by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation, which has gone on to raise more than $300 million for the wild things and wild places of Texas. So that's been a wonderful thing, and I believe many other states, Fish and Wildlife agencies, followed suit and developed foundations following Ed Cox's leadership to start the Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation. So I just mentioned Ed Cox. It is the Edwin L. Cox Texas Freshwater Fisheries Center. Ed was one of our first commissioners, and he started our foundation, was chairman of the board. And so we're very proud to have his name on this facility as well. Certainly a leader in bass management and fisheries work. And you need those fellows that have deep pockets and political connections to help get things done in fish and wildlife resources. And the magnitude that Ed has had is well beyond some that I think we can even really fathom. So very grateful for him and the folks that he brings along. So anyway, back to TFFC. We've had about 1.1 million visitors since opening in 1996. Every year, we have about 40,000 visitors, 25,000 of which go fishing while they're here. We say all you have to do is have a desire. We have everything else to take you fishing. And so that's a pretty cool deal. And every day that we've been open, on average, 2 people have caught their first fish here that we've documented. So we have recreational fishing ponds. This is one right outside your window. You'll see folks fishing out there today, tomorrow, and we open Sunday afternoon. So you won't see any during the meeting Sunday morning. But we have these ponds are wetland trail, and we actually have Strike King Pond all the way in the back of the wetland trail as well. So the building to your far left, on the other side of Lake Zebco, with the green roof, is our Anglers Pavilion, the Brookshire's Anglers Pavilion. So that's where you get your gear, your bait, tackle, rod and reel combos, all that great stuff, and you can go fishing while you're here too. It does smell like stink bait in there. And like I've tried to impress upon our staff, stink bait smells like victory, because we're in the business of people catching fish. So enjoy that stink bait smell and the smiles that come along with it. Our visitor center is at the top of the hill. Every one of you guys are welcome to enjoy that visitor center during breaks. We end early, that sort of thing. We're open 9 to 4, Wednesday through Saturday, and 1 to 4 on Sunday. But we just recently completed a 22-month long, that was the construction phase, major renovation of those facilities, about $8.5 million renovation, the vast majority of which through private funds and partners and friends that have helped. That included the full draining and restoration of each of our fishing ponds and their habitats, and that'll be a lot of talk happens today about those. The fishing piers that went along with that. And then inside the visitor center, we have 300,000 gallons of aquariums. Every one of those were touched. Some were replaced. Acrylics were replaced on all. Habitats inside were redone. Interpretive pieces redone. We have a wonderful Fishes of Texas theater, where we do dive shows daily, feed the fish and talk to folks, as well as a tram. Does anybody know who Ethel is? Ethel, yeah. Amberly's like, yeah, Ethel's awesome. Well, Ethel is above the exit sign on the other door there. Ethel was share lumper #1, state record in 1986, that kicked off the share lumper program, 17.67 pound beauty from Lake Fork. After Ethel was caught turning to the program, she went to Bass Pro Shops at the Granddaddy store in Springfield for 9 years, where they attributed her to bringing 2 million visitors into the Granddaddy store. Now, I don't know if you guys worked in retail at all in your life. I hope not. But if you have, you'll know that if you're a GM, you know everybody that walks in that door on average how much money you're gonna make off of them. Okay, so think about 2 million visitors going into Bass Pro Shops and what that meant for growing Bass Pro and being able to eventually buy Cabela's. So Johnny is a big fan of Ethel, as you can imagine, and that's part of why this is the Hart Morris Conservation Center. The nice check that Johnny wrote to support this facility, and the memo line said, "In memory of Ethel." So that's a pretty cool deal. And so we like to remember Ethel. We have a mascot and the Ethel Express, a tram ride, which is where I was going with all this, which is really cool. We have a metro tram, and we actually take people for tours of the hatchery and talk about the important work that we do on our hatcheries, including in the great state of Texas, where we all appreciate the value of water, that our hatcheries are water borrowers, not water users. We return more and better water quality back to Lake Athens than we take out of it. So that's a pretty cool deal. So anyway, I hope you find some time today to be able, or while you're here, to be able to visit the visitor center, enjoy all of the exhibits that we have, our electrofishing exhibit, look down into the Lunker Bunker, because we're home to the Share Lunker program, where all those big, beautiful rotund ladies come to spawn and do all that good stuff. So anyway, again, welcome to the Texas Freshwater Fisheries Center. I'm gonna be quiet now, not forever, because I cannot make that promise. But I am gonna welcome up the man we all know and love, my former boss and longtime mentor and friend, Doug Nygren. So Doug, take it away.
Thanks, Al. Well, it's a good group. I was a little bit worried about what was going on with tight budgets across the country and shutdowns and all that, but thank you for coming. This is a nice representation of our partners across the country, so welcome to Athens, and hopefully we put together a good program for you. I think I would like to start things off by recognizing the companies and the sponsors that have been supporting our partnership over the last few months. We have OASE, Solitude Lake Management, Sequel 4, Biobase, Reef Innovations, Mossback Fish Habitat, the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, Bass Conservation, YakBassAnglers.com, and AFCO, American Fishing Tackle Company. So we appreciate the support of our sponsors, and you'll be hearing from several of those companies today to talk about how they have goods and services that can help us meet our mission and improve fish habitat nationwide. We're very appreciative of the sponsorships. It gives us the ability to do things we can't do with our just our federal operations and maintenance budget. It allows us to go way beyond what we can do with just the federal funds that have restrictions on how we can spend. So that said, I do want to go around the room and let everybody just quickly stand up, tell everybody your name and where you're from, and let's start over here with Gary.
Yes, Gary Klein, I'm from here in, actually Mingus, Texas. But I'm just a professional angler, somebody that enjoys fishing, and, I'm excited to be here. Because it's everybody in this room that ensures that I'm gonna be able to go out and catch fish across country. Thanks for everybody.
It's great to have Gary here again this year. Thank you, Gary.
Stephen Martin, I'm from Community Chief Texas. I own a private lake management company, Texas Lake Management, and Gary and I co-own Black Bass Stewardship Group and help Major League Fishing with their conservation efforts. Mike Swartz, I work for Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, and basically just a lake habitat manager.
Then Page, Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, lake habitat such as.
I'm a fisheries biologist with the Missouri Department of Conservation and Marine.
Jeremy Risley, I'm the statewide black bass coordinator for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, and I'm out of North Central Arkansas.
Jim McFarland, old retired guy, representing Reef Walk Foundation, Reef Innovation, out of Kingsville, Florida, is me, but it's worldwide.
John Allen, out of Brownwood, Texas, Brown County Water District District, he's running Lake Brown there and everything.
Dale Weaver with Brown County Water District. And, we help with some of the reef and all that.
Thanks for being here, guys.
My name is David Bogner. I'm a fisheries biologist out of southeast of Oklahoma, vehicle with Department of Wildlife.
Alex Salford, one Department of Wildlife, assistant manager, the Oklahoma Fish Hatchery.
I'm Todd Krieger. I'm on Sequel 4. We do mechanical dredging, hydraulic dredging, we build and construct lakes, and we're honored to assist in the remodel here. So we really enjoyed that project, and as a result, my grandson caught his first fish here. So I'm a big supporter of this place.
Spencer Phillips, Fish Habitat Biologist for the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, and Western Kentucky and Western.
Say what?
Been
Jeff Manning, Second Department of Fish and Wildlife, Assistant Director over fish hatcheries, fisheries research, fish habitat.
David Beasley, I'm the Director of Fisheries for Salton Lake Management, and, based out of Virginia, but do much work around the country. Happy to be here.
I'm Reed Green, a retired hydrologist slash mineralogist with the U.S. Geological Survey in Arkansas. And, I'm the North American Lake Manager, so I'd be rep of the survey.
Craig Walker, Assistant Chief of Fisheries, Utah. Don Wiley, Aquatic Habitat Coordinator of Utah.
Amber Lee Jones, I'm the statewide sport fish program manager.
Kurt Gill, I'm the Reservoir Habitat Program Manager for the Arizona Game and Fish Department of our Phoenix headquarters. Dave Bailey, I'm the statewide aquatic habitat specialist for Arizona Game and Fish.
I'm Lacey Schmidt, I'm a reservoir biologist for Arizona Game and Fish out of our region state office.
I'm Tony Aaron, I'm the city administrator for the city of Burles, Texas, and, here representing the communities that benefit from the work that y'all do. We recently built a community lake with the help of the partnership, Texas Parks Wildlife and Michael Homer, Stephen and Gary, both been a big partner in that. And so our community's seeing the benefits of the work they don't do, and it's really been a wonderful experience to do that. So thank y'all for what y'all do on that.
I'm Brunson, Division of Wildlife Resources out of Utah. I'm an assistant aquatics manager in our for the region.
Ryan Ross, South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, Reservoir Habitat Technician.
Chevy Rover, South Carolina DNR, Habitat Technician.
I'm Brett Morris, South Carolina DNR, and I'm a technician.
Brian Miller, Assistant Fisheries Biologist out of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Country.
Lloyd Robinson, Assistant District Fisheries Biologist out of Colorado.
My name is Hayden Osborne. I'm with the Wausau Lake Therapy. And I just want to say thank you everybody for allowing us to be a part of this great event.
Glad to have you. Thank you.
Rich Zweifel, I'm with the Ohio Division of Wildlife, representing NAFLA.
Ryan Schultz out of Daytona Beach, Florida, and representing Biobase.
Alice Best, I'm First Wildlife, I'm the regional director for Central and West Texas.
Or folks, North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission, and the people on Aquatic Habitat.
Morning, everybody. I'm Michael Homer. I am our Texas Parks and Wildlife Habitat and Angler Access Program Coordinator, as well as interim district supervisor for the Abilene office. I want to say thank you for being here, and we're happy to have you in Texas.
David Brand, Texas Department of Wildlife, Kyle Gunn, PFFP, Angler Recognition Program Coordinator.
As you know, I'm Tom, I'm a recovering monologist.
Patrick Program and Communications Coordinator for Friends of Reservoirs and the Reservoir Partnership, also fisheries bionutrition with Iowa DNR.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. So it's a great crowd. We got a lot of folks here that have tremendous expertise, and we can share and exchange ideas and go home a little bit better than when we came, hopefully. I wanted to start off the conversation on the workshop to talk about, to thank, first of all, Mike Homer, Tom Lang, and Stephen Barden for coming up with the idea for this workshop to partner with the private sector and learn more about what the private sector has to offer. And David, or Stephen, could you come up just real quickly and talk a little bit about the vision you guys had for this workshop?
All right, I'm gonna make it brief. Doug told me this morning I was doing this, so I didn't write anything down, but whenever we left Black Bass 2025, Michael Homer, Tom Lang, and I started having conversations about what would a workshop look like for this meeting. And in the past, the workshops really focused on a project that we can go see or something that we can physically work with. And Tom and I always discuss partnerships. With this project, we had a lot of partners that put it together on the Fishery Center renovation. And I looked at what is being offered through Friends of Reservoirs in the way of partnerships through grants. And we brought Doug an idea, which would be, what if we used the workshop as a way to bring in new partners that would then provide grant opportunities? And I wanted to focus on some of the historic companies that have supported us, like Reef Ball and Mossback. I wanted those people to be involved, but I also wanted to bring in new opportunities from vendors that maybe you haven't heard from. They're either new in the space or they have new technology. And we wanted to ask them to provide us insight into historic issues. And Doug brought Reed in, and Reed is gonna kind of be your moderator today and set the stage for 3 common issues we have as Reservoirs age. And then we'll have 2 vendors discuss their approaches to those issues, as well as an opportunity to see their technologies in work outside, and then eventually be able to apply for a grant to use some of those technologies in case studies in your own work. So hopefully this all works out, the workshop goes smoothly, but for each one of these, feel free to ask about very niche projects that you have. We want this to be an open dialogue. Becca's got some cool stuff where she's gonna have an app that we can download, or a way to kind of engage, and she'll have questions to ask us. Because the other thing is, these companies are coming to their first meeting with us. They need to learn, what does this organization need? And what do you need as state fisheries biologists to do your habitat work? So a little bit of these questions is to help them figure out how to best support us. So whenever we see the grant applications, those may change over the next several years as they learn us and how to better support us.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So that being said, I think we're ready to kick it off, and Reed Green is going to be our moderator and set the stage for these 3 nutrient challenges that we have been discussing. Reed is a longtime associate with this partnership. He's been on our steering committee forever, I think, and has a lot of history with the kind of work that he did with our partnership. But I got a little bio I want to read to you so you get a little better understanding. This is in the world of reservoirs. This is a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. So we're really fortunate to have Reed here to kick this whole thing off. Reed is a retired hydrologist, limnologist with the U.S. Geological Survey in Little Rock, Arkansas. He retired in January of 2021 after 31 years. He conducted numerous lake and reservoir and watershed water quality investigations during his career with the USGS. Prior to that, he worked with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Research Development Center in Vicksburg, Mississippi, in their aquatic plant control research program. He holds a bachelor's and master's in botany with a master's with an emphasis in phytoplankton ecology. And he has a PhD in biology with an emphasis in limnology from the University of Arkansas. Reed's project work with USGS dealt mainly with watershed hydrology and reservoir water quality and eutrophication, and he authored or co-authored over 60 USGS or U.S. Army Corps of Engineer reports, as well as professional journals, papers, etc. Reed once held an adjunct faculty appointment at the University of Arkansas Fayetteville, and currently is an adjunct at the University of Arkansas Little Rock in the Biology and Earth Sciences Department, mentoring undergraduates and graduate students, and teaching special topic courses such as phytoplankton ecology, phytoplankton identification and use in bioindicators, plant biology, surface water hydrology, and currently limnology on an annual class. I think he teaches in limnology. Soon he will also branch out into stream ecology as well. When Reed is not volunteering with the Arkansas Master Naturalist Program, extracting trash out of the Forest Creek and Forest Bottoms in Little Rock, where they've removed over 40,000 pounds of trash since November of 2020, he's out riding his mountain bike, he's hiking trails or working in his vegetable gardens. You can find him in his kayak or canoe viewing nature while sampling sick targets with a variety of, and this is interesting, single sane Necton samplers. So I'll let him explain exactly what that might be. With that, Reed, I'm going to turn it over to you to get the discussion going and handle the master ceremonies for the rest of the morning.
That's a rod and reel.
I figured it was.
Single thread.
Yep, got it.
Thanks, Doug. All right. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. I haven't been to one of these in a few years since I retired, and I don't have the USGS to cover my travel. So it's good to be as close by. It's about a 5-hour drive from Little Rock. So, yeah, so. Okay. I guess I'll read it off of this. Yeah, so this is the title, of my talk, Aging Reservoirs Have Lost. I'll read it from here. Most of their original fisheries habitat, aquatic life habitat, filling in, promoting harmful algal blooms. I mean, it's not anything that y'all don't know. And so let me figure out just technology. So this is a graph that I prepared many years ago. So it is at 2020, so we gotta add 5 years. But there was a reservoir database that had all the reservoirs that were built and the years they were built. And so we know from like 1940 to around 1970, there were a lot of reservoirs being built, and they're still being built. But for the most part, we're in 2020, we're from 1940 to present day, they're old. They've been aging. They're not the same as they used to be when you impounded the river valley or the floodplain. And of course, you're inundating a lot of vegetation and trees and stuff like that that feeds the food chain to grow big bass. So that's just kind of give you an idea of the history of dam building. And this is the first book I actually came across. What is it? Reservoir Fisheries and Limnology. I mean, can I pull this mic off?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can see it.
Yeah, you can break his mic off.
Still on? Okay. So this is a quote from it. Reservoirs have provided us with a valuable fishery resource, one that we've not yet begun to manage effectively or efficiently. We hope this volume will provide readers with more insight, understanding where we are and what we are accomplishing with reservoir fisheries now, and stimulate new directions and broader horizons for future reservoir research. And so that's 1971, and there's a couple of more slides that are coming out of this. The first one out of this was the dynamics of density stratified reservoirs. And so this, there's a pointer on this. Anyway, so the top one, if the inflow is warmer than the reservoir water, it's going to flow over the top of it. So it's not going to mix, equally top to bottom. And then second one is if the temperature is colder than the reservoir, then it's going to sink and plunge to this layer of equal density. And that's what the third one's showing is it's reaching its equal density. And so it's an interflow, the other middle one's underflow, and the other one's overflow. So you can't think of a reservoir as being one, the chemistry as being one, type, and the temperature as being one type. Right? So there's a lot of things going on. Oops. So we can simulate these now. I don't know if I can get this simulated. You guys from Arkansas, Missouri, and White River folks, y'all seen these before. You'll see if they can get it. There we are. I guess not. Oh, that's working. Okay, so this is age. So new water is going to be blue, old water is going to be red. And so the new water is obviously gonna be the water that's flowing in. And you can see the overflow, this Beaver Lake, by the way, in northwest Arkansas. And, we're in September now, it's getting cooler. And then you're gonna see interflow and underflow. And so all that new water is going down, the old water is, turning red as it ages. And this is from a CE Corps of Engineers Qual W2, it's a two-dimensional model. So everything coming out of the screen and going into the back is laterally average, so it's upstream to downstream in depth. And so that kind of gives you an idea of all the seasonal stuff. And so, what's happening in the summer is not the same as it is in the winter, obviously. And these things are highly dynamic systems. Down there, I think that's Hickory Creek, it's going into it. So another text, the first edition of Cook and Others, Lake and Reservoir Restoration came out in 1983. This is from a group from Noms, Cook and others. A bunch of guys from Noms produced this. Reservoir Fisheries Management Strategies for the 80s. We're far from that now. Came out in 1986. First edition of EPA's Lake and Reservoir Guidance Manual came out in 1988. And one of my favorites is Thorne, Kimmel, and Payne's Reservoir Limnology, Ecological Perspectives, came out in 99. Payne's a good friend of mine. I've known Thornton for years. I've run into Kimmel in the past. And that's what this book is over here. That's a really good book. If you haven't got it. And you might find it on some of the online used bookstores. Reservoir Fisheries Management Strategies for the 80s came out in 1986. Reservoirs now constitute and undoubtedly continue to be one of the most valuable resources, a resource that's exceeding complexity, poorly understood, and crudely managed at the best. As such, reservoirs continue to provide major fishery management problems, consequently offer tremendous opportunities for improvement. That could be 2025. These are programs. These are programs that have expired over the years. I'm not sure about this TVA. They're still doing a whole lot of reservoir research. They were kind of the first ones that were getting into the Fish and Wildlife Reservoir Research Program. Pretty much crashed in the 80s. What they were studying are White River and Upper Missouri systems. Actually, at the U of A, they had an office there, and I was called a few years ago to, they've taken all the cabinets of all the research paper, folders, and put them in a lean-to at the Agri Farm at the University of Arkansas. And they were gonna tear down, put a building there. So one of the Arkansas Water Resources folks said, "Hey, Reed, we've got all these files of reservoirs from the old program. What do you want to do with them?" I said, "Oh, I'll be right up." So I went and got them. I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but I didn't want them to, go into the dumpster. And Steve Miranda has them now. And so if you're interested, if he still has them, there's a lot of old stuff in those things. And then Army Corps of Engineers Reservoir Water Quality Research Program. I worked in that too, as well as aquatic plant control research when I was there. It's gone. And so, and then we got Federal Clean Lakes Program, it crashed by 1995. So we don't have any of this going on right now that I'm aware of. It's all, states doing their things and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a shame. So this came out of Kimmel and Gregor. This is the one I was talking about, Kimmel and liminal ecological changes with reservoir aging. And so the top slide, and these are whatever you call them, models. So at that time, they took you impound a reservoir, you pound all that vegetation and soils, the nutrients are gonna come up. And so the internal load is gonna peak. And, trying to see if we go. Oh, there it is. So it's gonna peak, but in this conceptual model, they just decided, well, we're not gonna have any more internal loading. After that point, once the initial impoundment comes, internal loading is gonna disappear, and that's the problem. So you got external loading, if it increases, it's gonna be number 2, if it stays the same, it's gonna be number 1, if it decreases, number 3, and that's gonna affect the phytoplankton. So the internal load, you got, if you impound a reservoir, you get a lot of, the fish are really good, a few years after impoundment. And, but then, once that's used up, it goes away. So the fishing's good, and then you got external loading, that increases nutrients, and of course, it increases fish, as long as it's the right kind of, phytoplankton, and so on. So you got a trophic upsurge, a trophic depression, trophic disequilibrium, equilibrium basin filling begins. And so those are all issues that we're gonna be looking at, here ahead of time. And that's a good read if you don't have it. So taking that top slide, where the internal load goes to pieces, it's no interest whatsoever. We're finding out now that the internal load is dominating the external load. And so, because all the sediment that's coming in, all the muck, all the organic material, that's all in reduced stage under the hypoxic, hypolimnia. So the total P, well, the external P, now let me get back. So we're looking, if the internal P actually increases, if we, change this paradigm to this, then you still got increases in external P because of agriculture, subdivisions, stuff like that. Now your total P is gonna be this high. And that's gonna promote the nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria because it becomes nitrogen limiting. And so the green algae and the chrysophytes, the golden brown algae, they can't compete with the nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria, and then you have harmful algal blooms. You can stop asking me questions while I'm going if you want. It doesn't bother me. They don't in classrooms anymore. So that's, so here's, I just added, plankton here. And so, anyway, that's, this is what I just told you. Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll just skip that. This is a good, another good conceptual model I found out of, Weir and others, is 2515 publication, freshwater algae in North America. It's the only one I've seen that has mixing in it. Usually you see, inflows coming in, you got, the fish doing all that. Mixing in our aging reservoirs is probably the #1 issue of bringing phosphorus, particularly into the photic zone. And without knowing that, or just not considering that, your paradigm or whatever is going to be, erroneous. And so that's kind of what is going on today. Taylor Mavar has, she's doing a lot of phosphorus work, and she's actually got a chapter in Wetzel's limnology as a new edition of Wetzel's limnology, #4, I think, which is a really good, covering this. It's so global phosphorus retention by reservoir damming, and she has all these numbers about how much reservoirs are trapping phosphorus. And then phosphorus accumulates faster than nitrogen globally in freshwater ecosystems. So now the science is catching up, you know, with what's going on. These are some old animations of water temperature, dissolved oxygen, total phosphorus and chlorophyll, just to see, you know, how these dynamics, again, this is Lake Maumelle, which is the city of Little Rock's major water supply. It's an impounded floodplain. It's not a river valley. So that's why it's only about 30 feet deep, but it's 1,800 acres, 18,000 acres. So I'm gonna kick this off if I can and kind of walk you through it. If I can. There. So this is temperature, and we're in September, so that we're getting ready to have the turnover. This is dissolved oxygen. Of course, phosphorus is high in anaerobic condition. And then, so when it turns over, the phosphorus goes into the photic zone. And then if you look at chlorophyll, you'll see a bloom. You almost have to have 4 eyes. But there it goes up and then there's a bloom. And Maunelle's a mesotrophic reservoir. It's not high, you know, it's not eutrophic or hypertrophic. So here's some still shots. So this is October 30. You can see the phosphorus starting to build up, chlorophyll's building up. And if you look at the vectors, the wind's blowing from dam upstream, which pushes, it piles the water on top of the shallow area, which pushes the water towards the dam. And so there's velocity going on. And that velocity, once it hits the dam wall, all this phosphorus has nowhere to go but up. That's the point. And then you have, this is September 5th. It happens pretty quick. And there's your alga bloom. So this is another example of that, just to show, we showed a Beaver Lake with some different software before, but you can see how this happens in the deep lake, like Beaver Lake. And yeah, like I said earlier, Beaver Lake has a rich history. If anybody can find those old documents, because they put the Fish and Wildlife Reservoir people in at the university to study Beaver Lake as it was being filled. And, you know, so you can see the algae in the bottom right. And that's pretty typical of Beaver Lake. There's 2 water treatment plants. One's, you know, like right here and the other's here. And you can see the, you know, the Lovedale sag going under the thermocline. Table Rock Lake is a little different because it has, you know, somewhat cold water coming into it from Beaver. And the point is, not every reservoir is the same. You don't have a textbook reservoir. And so these models are good to understand, you know, what your particular reservoir is doing. They're not too hard to put together, as long as you got inflow and chemistry and temperature. And temperature profiles, DO profiles to calibrate it. But see, there was the interflow and what I was wanting to show you. Look at that DO side going right under the thermal side. And this is a Table Rock, which is a little different. No, I won't show this too much longer. Then the phosphorus, and you can see the phosphorus, peaking into at the linear, which causes the algal growth, maybe not necessarily algal blooms. And I'll skip this one. So, and they may have this online where you can download it. So more recently is you can model it or you can measure this stuff in real time. This is a environmental sensing platform that was developed out of the University of Western Australia in Perth. And what it has is temperature and oxygen sensors. So you got some of them hanging from the buoy, and then you got others anchored from the bottom. And this is good for reservoirs because, they're fluctuating so much. And so if you just have one buoy that's just with they're all hanging down, it's gonna go up and down with the reservoir. So it's not, so you can't take that one sensor and say this is 4 feet deep. And, or, 4 feet from under the surface or 10 feet above the water. And, so I've helped install these with them. I was down at Perth for, 4 or 5 months, working with them. We put one of these in, Lake Como. That's cool. And in Great Salt Lake, we put one in. That's another story. We can talk about that later. That was cool. And so this is what you get with them. So it's high frequency measurements, and you can see the dynamics. This is what, 827 to 910. So maybe that's 2 weeks, not even that, over time. And you can see this is at Lake Monmouth, because that wind, when it blows from the dam upstream into a shallow, it pushes down on the hypolimnion, which then the cold water builds up momentum and goes down to topographical, depths, because, gravity's pulling it, it's being squeezed, like stepping on a ketchup pack. And so it hits the dam wall. And so here's, less than 4.5, between 4 and 3.5 milligrams per liter of DO. But that's also carrying that phosphorus up there and putting it in the foliar zone. So that's a good way to, understand your system, and then great data to calibrate a model with. This is a 3D grid. This also came out of Perth. It's a really cool model. So this is these are 100 by 100 meter cells, 1 meter deep. Takes a lot of computational power to work with. And so this is Lake Monmouth. Here's the inflow, the intakes right here. Again, you see when the water blows down to the dam, it pushes down. I think this next slide. This is the tracer simulation. This is cool. You can see you can see all the swirls and stuff. And so we didn't physically put a tracer, it's a numerical tracer in the model input file. It doesn't, decay or it's just a hard number. But you can kind of see how it pulsates and where the water flows. And so this is, the tracer. I was gonna say, hey.
This tracking phosphorus?
No, this is a tracer. It's like a rhodamine dye. It's like putting rhodamine dye in it, but it's a number instead of a dye concentration. And in the model grid, there's some cells that I never published this. I never got the funding to publish this. And so the grid's not totally cleaned up, but, oops. So this is a chlorophyll A, which is gonna show you what happens when it boils up. It's just, that's day, night, day, night. I don't know what, I guess it settles and goes up, so I don't know. There's that, what time is this? Oh, it's, September 15th right now, so that was that turnover event in early September. So I think that's all I got. So we're here to talk about three things: habitat loss, what are the nutrients, and sediment, nutrient sediment, and hard habitat loss. So this is phosphorus trapping. This is an old book from, where was it, 1953. So it's percentage of eroded soil caught in a reservoir as related to capacity versus percentage of eroded soil caught in the reservoir. And I mean, it's you're gonna get more, depending on the reservoir, but they're all different. There's no two reservoirs that are the same. We did a survey for the Corps of Engineers back in, well, I don't know, not too long ago. Millwood Lake, they had to redo their curve because, the original capacity curve by depth of impoundment, if the reservoir's half full, you can't go by the curve and releasing water downstream. And so they funded us to do it. It was out of our Missouri office. And so this is pretty cool. This was a wild time. So we had a guy in Missouri that was a GIS dude, and he sees this pretty blue polygon. I mean, how many of y'all know Millwood Lake? I know a few of you. It's nothing but stops. It's crazy. And so he sees this pretty blue polygon, and he says, "Oh, we can run the boat at 6 miles an hour, and we can get this done in 13 days." So we collected 3,340 data points. We traveled 490 miles. And then came back and, went back and did some quality assurance. So the blue lines are the not 490 miles. And then the red lines are the QA. And anyway, we went about almost 600 miles. And there's two boats. So we couldn't travel 6 miles an hour. They got really bad at us. So anyway, this is the new curve. But what I wanted to show you is let me stop. Here we are, 25 feet of water. I'll tell you later. We got 25 foot of pipe and they slowly, a little bit down for all for it. Daniel's taking a measurement. Pretty high tech stuff. He's at bottom now. Digging mud, trying to get back like this. Uh-oh. Don't let go of it. If you let go, you got to squeeze diving for it. Yeah, we should have. It'd be a. Sideways. Gotta lose your mind when you're out there. It's a little river channel. The main river. Turn back this way. Oh, it's 3/4 inch all thread. Really on two. I'm seeing you on the table, so that's not for you. There's something I played around and sketch, so. Right there. So I'm looking a little bit on the thread right there. That's what we'll do. You want to say maybe a little deeper. Or consider on the. What do you think, Daniel? Good stuff. See how coordinated. Got it. And that's the quietest I've seen Mill ever. It's a big lake, wind blows. A lot of mud. Not the big. All right, we're out. But all that gray matter on that off thread was decomposed organic matter. The gray was from reduced manganese. There's probably reduced iron, but the manganese, overwhelmed it, color wise. And so that was 86 inches, just at one point. And we did 132 locations. Did a bunch of quality assurance, and so the mean. No, that's just some more quality assurance. But here's the output. This is the Little River arm. I don't know where that site was, but these are points we made. So it was in here somewhere. So the sediment thickness in this Little River area, this yellow area, was 4.9 feet, 2.3 in the green, 3 point up here. Now, when the sediment's flowing, it's settling out, and it's deeper, and this is the old river channel, and that was 5.7 feet, and then so yeah, I mean, I didn't do pre-incumbent contour to the present day contour, but that's a lot of sediment in that reservoir, and all that. I mean, you saw on the all thread, it's just muck. So this is siltation before siltation. I should have reworded that. And now here it is after. So you can drop the all thread down there and figure out how deep that is. So this is really interesting. This is Conowingo Dam on the Susquehanna, built in 1928. One of those way down here on the chart I showed earlier. It supplies 50% of fresh water to Chesapeake Bay. It traps 3.5 million pounds of pee per year. The storage capacity has reached equilibrium. That means water going in, water goes out. You can't regulate it anymore. So they've got to figure out something to do with that dam. They can't knock it out, because if you knock it out, you're going to kill the Chesapeake Bay, because all that muck's going down in it. So for the rest of the morning, we're going to talk about habitat loss first. No, wait a second. I changed this last night or sometime. So let me go back. habitat loss. Anyway, so if rocky bottoms and original woody plant material, inundated timber, et cetera, have not been covered up with silt already, the rocky bottoms may remain, but the woody material definitely decomposed over the years in our older reservoirs. So where do we go from here? We're experiencing the unintended consequences of impounding free-flowing rivers and streams. Most of all, if not all, the organic matter flowing in these impoundments is gone due to sedimentation, organic habitat, I'm sorry, due to sedimentation. And can we continue to ignore the function and role of internal phosphorus loads that lead to harmful algal blooms? How will we mitigate the buildup of legacy internal phosphorus stores in our reservoirs? That's gonna be a challenge. I mean, that's gonna be a big challenge. What are the consequences of dam removal? Like I mentioned in Conowingo, you'll kill the Chesapeake. The reservoirs have provided us, going back to 1971, reservoirs have provided us with a valuable resource, one that we have not yet begun to manage effectively or efficiently. And so what has changed since 1971? That's it. So with that, I think we're gonna call up. We've got an online. I lost my notes. I had them up here. What I need to do.
I'll get you switched over.
Okay.
You don't want to pronounce his name?
Yes. Any questions while we're waiting? Comments?
Those maps you were making of the reservoirs and how will that flow? Is that pretty consistent?
The what now?
You had your models of your reservoirs where you were watching fluctuations in phosphorus and DO over time.
Yeah.
And you were saying that every reservoir is different, but within that reservoir, is that model fairly consistent over time?
Well, the time frame for models, maybe 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
but the reservoirs, much older than that, so it's hard to tell, over the time, unless you start, if you have the data to build it from the beginning to present. It depends. It's kind of depends on the weather, as far as, within the 2 to 3 years,
Yeah.
cold winters, warm summers, high flow, low flow, that kind of stuff.
Right, yeah, because if you had done that in one of my systems this year, those effluents that are coming in from the system, all the nitrates and phosphates and stuff like that are probably way higher because they had the highest inflows we've had in 20 years.
Yeah, so you gotta put low weighted concentration, so you gotta take the variability and flow out. And then you can see the flow weighted concentrations on, and then determine the flow increase. Equation's pretty simple.
Yeah.
So I have a question and a theory. You said it or moved. When the cold water comes in, you're talking about the internal mid. Your sediment comes in at a heavier weight in micron at the entrance and falls. But the smaller microns, which is more mud, follows through. And based on that water temperature coming into that temperature of that lake, it will vary during the season and it will vary, quite frankly, on the micron size coming in on your sediment phase.
Yeah, because it's floating in whatever density it's equal with.
And what was interesting in your surveys, you were showing 2 to 3 feet over here at the entrance point, which is gonna be your harder sediments. And then back out in the center of that lake where you were going down, you had that darker black kind of gray sediment, which would be smaller microns, which would flow in that water flow coming into that lake.
Yeah, settle out.
Yeah.
Over time.
So it's like in Texas where we have really hot water lakes, that sediment, the sand is gonna hit the entry point, but that colder water hitting that lake is gonna carry that finer micron out into the center of the lake, which is like in Lake Athens. You know, the sand is, in the first 100 feet,
Yeah.
but then it starts getting into the really mucky stuff back out in the sun.
Yeah, 'cause it's gonna fall out, but
Yeah.
it's gonna, composition.
And it might be different over in Kentucky where the weather's different and the lake is warmer and the rainfall, you know, water temperature coming off rainfall, bringing the sediment in. Based on the temperature of the lake and where you're at, it's gonna cause a little variation of where the sediment hits.
It's not a black box.
Yeah,
And,
it all varies.
yeah,
Yeah,
and every road.
that was really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and those, yeah, you can get those 2D models out of Portland State University, they're the ones that are managing those models. And that's just upstream, downstream. And whatever perpendicular to the downstream gradient is, you know, laterally, I mean, it's lateral that, so you don't have that third dimension with tributaries and stuff like that.
Right.
But the 3D is a little more complicated. So yeah, our first speaker is David Riddell. Riddle. He's a water quality lead of the OSE Water Technologies philosophy on nutrient reduction within the water column and at the sediment layer using their lake therapy product line. So let's turn it over to David.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Can everyone hear me all right?
We can hear you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Riedel, Regional Water Quality Lead for OWASA. My region is the East Coast. So for those of you in that region, certainly happy to entertain any conversations you have about our products. OWASA is a global water and fountain technology company. I've been in the water industry over 15 years, 13 of which was at Solitude Lake Management, and I have recently joined OWASA in June of this year. So appreciate the opportunity to speak with the Friends of Reservoirs today. I believe that our mission and philosophy of being efficient, holistic, and sustainable aligns very closely with yours by restoring and sustaining healthy aquatic ecosystems. So look forward to a good conversation. And today I'll be presenting on our products and sharing some innovative and science-backed solutions that we've implemented to improve water quality and restore sediments and health in reservoirs and ponds. Did I freeze?
Sorry about that. I think our internet went out. Could you start over, David?
Yep, let's start over again. All right. So yeah, again, good morning. Thank you. Name is David Riedel, Regional Water Quality Lead at OWASA. Region is the East Coast. OWASA being a global water and fountain technology company. Myself, I've been in the water treatment industry for 15 years, 13 of which at Solitude Lake Management, and recently joined OWASA back in June. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with this group, the Friends of Reservoirs, today. I believe our missions of being efficient, holistic, and sustainable align closely with your mission by restoring and sustaining healthy and aquatic ecosystems. So today I'll be sharing some innovative science-backed solutions that we've implemented to improve water quality and restore sediment health in reservoirs and ponds across the country and even globally. Okay, all right. So yeah, again, good morning. Thank you. Name is David Riedel, Regional Water Quality Lead at OWASA. Region is the East Coast. OWASA being a global water and fountain technology company. Myself, I've been in the water treatment industry for 15 years, 13 of which at Solitude Lake Management, and recently joined OWASA back in June. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with this group, the Friends of Reservoirs today. I believe our missions of being efficient, holistic, and sustainable align closely with your mission by restoring and sustaining healthy and aquatic ecosystems. So today I'll be sharing some innovative science-backed solutions that we've implemented to improve water quality and restore sediment health in reservoirs and ponds across the country and even globally. Okay, so hitting you with a lot at first, but these are our core tools that we use in our holistic lake management approach. CDOX Max being a very powerful phosphorus binder, which also stabilizes pH and increases dissolved oxygen, which is important for a reduction of ammonia and supporting aquatic life. We have our Schlix Plus product, which goes further by introducing beneficial bacteria that promote the digestion of accumulated organic sediment. And while I will primarily be talking about those two, I will also touch on our OptiLake product, which complements these by improving food chain, food conversion rates, as well as overall fisheries health by stabilizing pH. So, oh, excuse me. So we'll jump right in. We'll start with our Schlix Plus product. The mechanisms and actions that it provides is going to, number one, increase oxygen concentrations. It's going to stabilize pH. It's going to help to control nutrients, binding primarily phosphorus, as well as helping with the nitrogen cycle. And the beneficial bacteria is going to help with the sediment digestion. So again, this is a multi-action approach that's going to help restore ecological balance and long-term sediment health. So what is the product? Again, you see two there. It is a 50-pound bag of calcium-based chemistries. Active ingredient in this product is our calcium peroxide, as well as other calcium-based chemistries like calcium chloride, calcium carbonate, as well as sodium bicarbonate. Coupled with that is a 5-pound bag of 100% purity, 7 different strains of beneficial bacteria that aid in the muck digestion and nitrogen cycling process. So what we're essentially doing is the Schlix bag is creating the ideal environment for the bacteria to continue to digest organics over time. So how is it applied? Schlix is designed to react a little bit slower, so it's going to have little impact on little direct impact on water column. It is heavier, so it is designed to fall through the water column and end up on that water sediment interface and provide its benefits there. Typically, the application is once, maybe twice a year at the rate of 450 to 650 pounds per acre. And that's what they found addresses most scenarios. Now, again, you can do some sediment testing to determine percent organics and accumulation to determine rate specific recommendations. But typically, what we are seeing with an application of Schlix Plus is about a 30 to 50% reduction in organic content in your sediments, as well as somewhere between a 6 to 12 inch reduction of sediment over the course of 1 year. So as the calcium peroxide integrates itself with the sediment, it disassociates the oxygen, which again is getting oxygen exactly where it's needed at that water sediment interface. So unlike aeration or fountains that do more of a passive approach, this releases pure oxygen into where it's needed. So it can be very efficient at providing oxygen where it's needed. Some of the benefits, it can be used at scale, so it's independent of depth and volume. You are dosing this on a surface acre basis, so 5, 10, 15 foot depth average doesn't adjust rate. It is still based on surface area, so it really is scalable. It's a good option for targeted muck. Obviously, lakes and ponds, the whole thing isn't always filled in. There are areas at inflow points or areas where you have more organic and sediment deposition, so you can do a focused, targeted approach, thereby limiting cost. And again, what we have seen is, I mentioned that there is really no direct impact on water column, but by addressing internal nutrient load, which I believe is where most of the nutrients are coming from in most lake systems is your sediments. You can cut off that internal recycling, and we have seen improvements in water column uh, nutrients with the application of this product. So overall, it's a good long-term restorative product. Again, it may take a few applications, annual applications to achieve goals, but considering that it takes decades to get to where you are, it's a very efficient restoration tool in the toolbox. So staying with Schlicks Plus, talking more about the benefits that the actions provide. This illustration describes how our products interact with the water sediment interface, which then create ideal conditions for restoration. So going through some are somewhat repetitive, but somewhere between 7 and 9 direct and indirect benefits. Oxygenation of the upper sediment layer, so getting oxygen exactly where it's needed. As the calcium peroxide disassociates, you get free calcium, you get a hydroxide, and you get the phosphate. When those come into play, you get those together, that does induce the formation of a new mineral called hydroxyapatite. So instead of adsorbing like other calcium-based chemistries, this actually creates a new mineral. And that mineral over time, if you look at numbers 4 and 5, helps to create an even more insoluble mineral called vivianite, which further takes phosphorus out of the play as it relates to phosphorus flux and availability, bioavailability. By improving oxygen levels at that water sediment interface, you improve the ability for metals like iron and manganese to continue to bind to phosphorus. And I think that's why in those anoxic conditions you see some of that phosphorus flux out of the sediment. So both direct and indirect phosphorus binding in your sediments. Now, when it comes to the organic matter degradation, number 6 and 9, again, if you just apply Schlicks without the bacteria, you're going to get organic matter reduction because there are bacteria there already. But by adding the supplied 5-pound bag, those bacteria are specifically designed for cellulose degradation, organic degradation, and nitrogen conversion. So you're again creating the ideal environment for those bacteria to do their thing. And by improving and increasing the amount of inorganic carbon, you're buffering pH. And my understanding is that the microbial degradation process is acidifying. So by buffering that capacity and limiting the acidification, it allows for the bacteria to continue to degrade organics. Again, as you know, in an anoxic scenario, Typically that is, you sometimes can get some smells from the sediments, primarily the reduced sulfur, giving off that rotten egg smell, which no one likes. So this can help aid in preventing that as well. So a lot of benefits, direct and indirect, with our Schlicks Plus product. Moving on to CDOX, very similar chemistries. That CDOX is really more directed at phosphorus mitigation in the water column. It is designed to be applied as a slurry and to get intimate contact with the water so that you bind phosphates in the water column. Again, the 50-pound bag, calcium peroxide. The max, we actually added a lanthanum oxide component to it for increased phosphorus binding capacity. And in fact, there are some synergistic effects between the calcium peroxide and the lanthanum that aid in the formation of that hydroxyapatite, as well as the rhabdophane, which is the mineral created through the lanthanum. So we're seeing some really good efficacy with this product as it relates to phosphorus mitigation. Again, you want to apply it as a slurry so you get good contact with the water. It falls slowly through the water column and reacts a little bit quicker. So you're going to get that oxygen release in the water column, as well as the nutrient balancing. And in shallow water systems, anything that doesn't react in the water and settles down to the bottom is going to provide similar benefits to that as described in the Schlicks. Dosing with this product is dependent on water volume. So a little bit different than a Schlick. So you're going to take depth into consideration. So generally an acre foot rate and phosphorus concentration. So if you have those two data points, you can calculate how many pounds of phosphorus you have in your water column, and each bag is, at minimum going to remove 1.5 pounds of phosphorus, and at higher concentrations, we've seen even higher rates removed. So again, really excellent phosphorus binding here. Other ways to integrate this into management strategies, post algae, an aggressive algae or weed application. We all know that after that, you have the potential for fish kill, as those bacteria want to digest the organics. This is a good way to help bind any available nutrients that are being released as a function of the application, as well as mitigation of any fish kills. I'm not saying we will prevent them, but again, you're supplying the oxygen that your lake needs to digest those, dead and dying detritus of the algae and weeds as you treat them. So expectations: an immediate reduction in available phosphorus, increase in dissolved oxygen, overall improving the C to N to P ratio, carbon to nitrogen to phosphorus ratio, which will in turn, we've seen this, select for healthier forms of algae, providing base forage for a healthy ecosystem and fisheries. So similar to the Schlicks, you're getting both direct and indirect benefits generally related to the water column as opposed to the sediment. Although again, anything that doesn't react in the water will provide benefits to the sediment. But we can reduce metals, reduce ammonia, enhance microbial activity. Again, a really good comprehensive solution for water quality improvement. Delivering oxygen, 2 types of direct phosphorus binding. And again, we have seen conversion of ammonia to nitrate, which is the less toxic and bioavailable form. So again, overall, good product, generally more related to water column than sediment. So, you know, in the real world, assuming that we're applying our products as intended and at rates necessary, you can expect to achieve some pretty good results. 6 to 8 inches of sediment reduction, increases in water volume. So again, as it relates to flooding, increasing water capacity is certainly important. Reducing available phosphorus. I mean, look at the one in the bottom middle, going from 1,200 parts per billion, which is highly eutrophic, almost wastewater levels, down to below 10, almost below detection level, as well as reducing ammonia, all in one application. And then from a management perspective, seeing pretty significant reduction in algicide and herbicide applications. So by shifting the nutrient ratios and improving water quality health, you're less prone to and less reliant on algicides and herbicides, which is in lockstep with our missions. So going from this site here on the left, the picture there of again, it's a smaller water body, but again, generally 50 to 100% covered with filamentous. The way we would anticipate application would be to treat that with an algicide, get rid of the algae so that those nutrients are available to be bound, come back and apply the product. In this case, it was Cedox, and the algae didn't come back, the rest of the year. And we were able to go from chasing to actually managing the water body. And I believe this was a good opportunity we had here at the Zebco fishing pond, which I understand is actually at the facility where this conference is taking place. So based on the water chemistry analysis and desired goals of improving water clarity and chemistry, we observed some pretty significant reduction in turbidity and alkalinity through a combined application of our OptiLake product, followed up by a Schlick's application. So again, these products do demonstrate our ability to support desired goals as well as recreational fisheries and habitat restoration. So if you look here, we got a 90% reduction within 1 week of turbidity, as well as a 35% increase in alkalinity. I guess coming more towards the end of the presentation, really more of a review summary here. Schlicks and Cedox, again, products to improve oxygenation, stabilize pH, reduce internal nutrient loading. I believe what separates them from other products is their comprehensive approach and synergistic action with multiple forms of phosphorus binding in the form of hydroxyapatite and rhabdophane, as well as muck reduction. So again, just a review of our product line. We outside of those, we have an 8-pound block and some aeration, which then even further help to aid in lake and pond and reservoir management. And with that, I think we're at the end of the presentation. Certainly appreciate the opportunity. Happy to entertain any questions. Again, my colleague Hayden is there on site. So if you have any questions or entertained in collaboration, certainly open to that. But again, thank you.
Cool. Next speaker is David Beasley. He's the Director of Fisheries and Fisheries Biologist with Solitude Lake Management, covers tri-marine and transforms the food web by decomposing organics, thereby incorporating the muck into the food web. Come on up, David.
All right, good morning, guys. Yeah, so I'm the Director of Fisheries at Solitude. I do live in Virginia. Worked all over the country though. My passion's growing big fish. And blessed to work around the country with some really private properties doing cool stuff. And through that process of trying to grow big fish, kind of need to focus on sediment health and water quality. And thank you. With a background in aquaculture, kind of the water quality and sediment health is a real problem in aquaculture. It's a real problem in lake management, reservoir management. And in the pursuit of growing bigger fish, kind of stumble across different ways to improve water quality. And there's a lot of tools we use as biologists, whether it's aeration, improving oxygen levels, or mitigating phosphorus levels, adding nitrate or nitrogen to water to get your NDP ratio more favorable. Sometimes we burn back bad algae with an algicide. Sometimes we grow or propagate or move beneficial algae species into a system and seed it. There's a whole complex way of kind of maintaining or managing the best possible plankton bloom. And on that journey, and the pain in the butt it is to manipulate a fishery and the bloom, kind of stumble across some technology I want to share with you. Trimary's not here today. As a company who uses Trimarine, I'm here to talk on their behalf. So see if I can get this to work. It shouldn't be too hard. Okay, so we're just going to talk about the food web at first and enabling the food web to solve for eutrophication. Times are changing. We have technology at our fingertips now on all levels of our life that are totally different than they were 20, 30, 50 years ago. And lake management, we finally have some breakthroughs in understanding and science that are changing the game fully. So when we talk about Trimarine, Trimarine is just one of probably many in the future, to be determined. And then we're going to go through some data. And I'm going to breeze through some of the data today. I've definitely got a lot of good data to show you. But tomorrow or Sunday, Ben, one of my colleagues, is going to give a presentation on a specific case study, 40-acre lake that I've been managing for a couple of years. So eutrophication is a problem, whether you're a high mountain lake or you're in Everglades, rivers, HOA ponds. Like we all know, eutrophication is a real issue. And it's not just the phosphorus that's building up. It's carbon, it's oxygen, it's nitrogen, it's muck, right? Like when you look at these lakes, we talk about the phosphorus as a problem, but really it's muck accumulating. And that muck is just mostly it's like 95+% carbon and oxygen, actually. The phosphorus is a very small component of the muck. And so our current path that we're on is organics are accumulating, and then the oxygen demand exceeds the available supply, right? There's a bunch we're going to talk about with oxygen today. This lack of oxygen leads to this muck accumulating, and then water quality deteriorates, and then more muck accumulates, and then the problem compounds, right? And the key here is balance within the food web is lost, and we're going to talk a bunch about that. So across the country, phosphorus, in most cases, not in some of the phosphate pits or some different areas around the country, but most of the country, phosphorus is actually limiting and very capable of being limiting. You know, 50 years ago, even 20 years ago, like everybody's thought phosphorus is limiting. And now we're kind of losing sight of that. But it's really incredible how you change a couple of things in the system and phosphorus becomes limiting really quickly again. And so existing management strategies are good, but they are not solving the problem fast enough. Like every solution that we use, and we use dozens as a company. We are the largest lake management company in the States, in the world, I'm sure. And every tool we have, and every tool all private folks have to manage, as well as you guys, the problem is outpacing you guys. As soon as you think you're ahead, you actually find out that you're still behind. And it seems impractical, especially on large scales, like large systems. And I think most importantly, dredging is simply impractical in general. Like there's a place and time for dredging, but it's not that realistic. And so how do we reverse the trend that we're dealing with? And why are the existing solutions struggling to keep up? And that's kind of like, as a researcher, really trying to figure out why
what we're doing isn't yielding a better result. And that's truly really like how you come down to like, how do you consistently grow 8, 9, 10, 12 pound bass? Like it's really, you really have to understand the system you're dealing with. And turns out, that chemical oxygen demand is the root of our problem. We see phosphorus as the problem, but chemical oxygen demand is the root of the problem. And, if you go back, say 10 years, it was kind of new to me at the time. And I thought we were cutting edge at the time. But phosphorus was kind of the new kid on the block of like, oh, this is our problem. If we could just fix phosphorus, we'll fix everything. And then, now we've kind of gone one step further, and I think we're at the end state here. But COD is the reason why the phosphorus is accumulating from my experience, as well as some very brilliant people, behind the scenes on this stuff. And in particular, COD, which we'll go through this, the non-biodegradable component. COD covers stuff that's biodegradable and stuff that's not easily biodegradable. I call it non-biodegradable, but it's really just not easily biodegradable. There's two components, which we'll jump into that. And so, but I first want to say, and this is more common overseas than in the States right now, but like COD is correlated to trophic state. We think of chlorophyll A or Secchi reading or total phosphorus, and we think trophic state, but COD is definitely correlated to trophic state. Like if you show me a hypereutrophic lake, I will show you high COD concentrations. Like there's a direct correlation there on some level. And this isn't exact, these numbers here, but and if you're into the literature, you can dig into this stuff. But there's definitely accumulation of COD in these systems, which makes sense because there's accumulation of muck, and muck is organic material. And maybe I should stop and say that. So we look at a lot of sediments. I look at the sediments all day long at times, and it's sand, it's clay, and it's silt. So when we're talking about the organics, we're really talking about the silt component. We're not really talking about the sand and clay. So a couple things here. Low COD, I see across the board, if you have low COD, the food web functions properly. And things move up and down the food chain into higher levels of the food web. And it is a path for phosphorus to become limiting. And then when you have higher COD, as I kind of mentioned, it cripples the food web's ability to process the organics. And it leads to this muck accumulation in hypereutrophic systems. And so just want to kind of restate this, but there's the biodegradable form of COD, and this is not easily biodegradable. And nature has a solution for the not easily biodegradable. An analogy I'll use is like if you take a piece of clothing or something, you put it out in the sun, you put it there for 20 years. I mean, the sun is going to destroy that piece of clothing at some point, right? Like the sun has a way of not using microbial degradation to break down things through UV light and other ways. The reality is it's really slow. And so our inputs as humans are faster than nature's natural process to break down the non-biodegradable component of chemical oxygen demand. That's kind of that's where I'm at on this right now. And and then when you look at all of our existing solutions in general, we don't have a solution that solves for this problem. Most of our solutions are trying to solve what nature can already do. Like we know, at least some people know, I think a lot of people used to know, that phosphorus is limiting and was limiting. And there was stuff going on. Nature was firing on all cylinders when phosphorus was limiting. And I'm not trying to brush over the fact that human inputs aren't high. Like I'm not saying that we're maybe irresponsible or something as a society, but like in reality, nature, its immune system is broken basically. It can't heal. It can't fix these lakes. It has a poor immune system and its metabolism is at a crawl. And so by solving for COD, we're able to pick up the pace on decomposition. And so, but the result of this situation is these lakes keep aging. And so the future of lake management, and we are moving into the future. I believe I've been working in the future for about 3 years now with this product. And there's other, like I said, there's a lot of tools at our disposal as lake managers. This is just one important tool that is now available that wasn't. And it's a very key part of the program.
So we need to enable the food web to solve its problems. We want to turn organic matter into fish biomass, basically. Like you take all that organics, it's mostly CO2, it's carbon and oxygen, just different form in that muck. We want to turn that into food for plants and algae, and we want to turn all that muck into fish. And there's no need for it to be in the form of muck, it can be in the form of fish. And so we want to let the food web do all the work though. Instead of going in and taking the phosphorus out of the system for the lake, let's enable the lake to take the phosphorus just out of its own system and move it up the food web. So once you do this, solving for COD, you promote biodiversity and healthy competition. The diversity within the flora and fauna go up noticeably. And then as their populations kind of self-regulate through competition, you end up with this balance that's restored and decomposition is able to flourish. And again, like I kind of got into all this through trying to grow big fish, but it really is great at complex lake management stuff. And then, so I'm not to this last bullet point yet in life. But there are some systems, especially in Florida that I work on that, the phosphorus levels are reckless. And we have tons and tons of data on this, but there are some systems where they're just broken enough to where you probably don't actually need deeutrophication. You could probably cycle the nutrients into the food web and probably be fine, but I'm speculating there. And then there's some where it's so bad where you actually have to extract the phosphorus from the system. Otherwise you're at risk of kind of short-term solution. You don't want to try to implement a long-term solution and turn it out it was short-term. And so we're learning our way through the true deeutrophication process, but harvesting fish is an easy out if you actually can mobilize those nutrients into fish. So what is Trimarine? It is a proprietary liquid formulation. There's a lot we can talk about it, but there are some things that right now are kind of kept close to chest. But you do apply it throughout the growing season. You really want water temperatures above 60 degrees. You want to apply it. And you're solving for chemical oxygen demand almost in a short burst. And because the more you solve for chemical oxygen demand, more stuff, you almost create more chemical oxygen demand through decomposition. And so it's a gradual restoration process. It's not a set it and forget it. As you start enabling the food web to increase its decomposition, you're creating more and more demand in some ways. And so kind of mentions the first meaningful solution for COD that I found brings balance to the ecosystem and accelerates decomposition. It's not an aldehyde, it's not an herbicide, it's not a flocculant, it's not a biological. It's simply solving for chemical oxygen demand. And it is, it's been tested by third party. It is NSF 60 certified for drinking water. It's gone through eco-analyst toxicity testing for everything from mussels, water fleas, trout, minnows, catfish. And it's used, the general dose we typically put in a water body, each application is 1 part per million. It was safe for drinking water up to 522 parts per million put in one dose. So it's like used well below any risk to health based on those standards. So here's our data. This is, we've got it in right now, and we've got trials going with a lot of products that I'm just speaking on behalf of the Trimarine stuff today, but we've got it in about 120 plus water bodies. I've lost track. Some of the stuff we're doing is with aquaculture also in there, so it kind of makes the number get higher, but we're in 100 plus lakes and reservoirs around the country, all private for the most part. We are starting in the next few months on public water finally. So this is just this is 7 projects. It's not like they were cherry picked for their data, but these are 7 projects that we did last year that were still done this year that we had data collected on last year also. And what I'm just trying to demonstrate here is our in-water total phosphorus parts per billion, dropped by 71% last growing season. So this is a growing season thing. But at the beginning of this growing season, so whatever that is, 12, 13, 14 months after the start of those projects, we were still noticeably down, right? It's not like the phosphorus levels just bounced right back up to where they started. And then NDP ratios, same thing, NW ratio of 20, it's considered decent. I prefer higher, but like you're getting into a threshold of like you're starting to be much better than 2.8 or even 10 is poor. But that nitrogen phosphorus ratio, we want to see that higher. And this is a 3-year restoration program at least. In some cases, it could be drawn out many years, depending on budget and objectives and your desire to really change a lake quickly. In sediment, the sediment's where everything is. So the sediment data, and I'll share some of that. The phosphorus dropped 50% in the first year on these projects, and it stayed down quite well. And so the sediment stuff is really that when I was first introduced to this stuff, they told me like, oh, you're just going to dredge a lake by solving this oxygen issue, and I kind of laughed at them. And then here I am 3 years later going, yeah, you can dredge a lake by just solving for oxygen, if it's organic matter. So this is a lake, Ben's going to talk about this tomorrow, so I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I just want to rifle through this one quick, and then we'll go on to a larger system. But this is a 40-acre lake in Wilmington, North Carolina. I've been taking care of it for 2 years. It was a dead lake, terrible oxygen levels. They couldn't have fish in there. But what I want to show you here quick is just the phosphorus quickly goes down. Like the phosphorus at 230 or 40 parts per billion quickly gets down. We're still eutrophic. Don't get me wrong, 88 is bad, but it's way, way, way better than 240. And then our NDP ratio, we started around 4. And we're year over year, we're doing better. These people signed up for a 3-year program, so we're just going to keep hopefully showing positive trend. Phosphorus in the sediment, 477 down to 142. Don't want to focus on the slides too much because I don't want to talk too much about that stuff, but that's core. So when we measure sediment depth with a 3/4 inch steel rod, there's only 2.5 foot of muck in this 40-acre lake. When we took it from 477 down to 142 in a span of 14 months, that's all of the muck. So we're taking the phosphorus down by 300 parts per million, which is 300,000 parts per billion of phosphorus out of that muck into the food web. And this is 14 months. These are I collected this data, right? Like, so I can attest this is real. And I'm interested to hear more about the magnesium you were mentioning, or manganese. But we're seeing decomposition in organic matter. You're seeing it get more earthy looking. Leaf litter. This is the upper end of the lake. The last picture was 10 foot of water. It's very much so like muck in the 10 foot of water. In the 3, 4, 5 foot of water, it's just detritus. It's like leaf litter or sticks and stuff. And this is just 12 months into it. The decomposition. So one thing I want to show you though, oxygen, this is an oxygen logger. We've got a couple oxygen DO loggers in the lake, temperature as well and stuff, but busy, but still worth looking at. So this is surface water. Purple's 2024, blue is 2025. The darker shade of colors when we were putting product in the water. What I wanted to show you though is, and we don't have 2023's data in here. I don't know if they had the logger in there in 2023. It's a different lake management company taking care of that part. But what I want to show is we had pretty poor oxygen in the water here at the surface, where this year we've done a little bit better, and these are incremental improvements. But this is the bottom. So this is a foot off the bottom in 10 foot of water. And from May of last year to October of last year, basically zero oxygen a foot off the bottom of this lake. And this year, we only had that for a month or so. So we're trending better. But one thing that's notable here is right here, we increased our doses. So we got the data in. We're a little late to the party on the data because it's not our data. The other lake management company had to notify me oxygen was low on the bottom. And that was one of the things we're paid to fix. And so we increased the dose from 1 part per million to a part and a half per application. And we're just slowly seeing improvement. But as you decompose those organics, the demand will get lower, and we will be able to pull out of this with lower and lower doses until we don't need to. So this, moving on though, quick. This is a 900-acre set of lakes. They total 900 acres. This is outside of Memphis in Arkansas. Very good, kind of prestigious duck hunting club that has really good fishing. €100+ club. Menashe is their biggest lake, Mink is their smallest, so they kind of go smallest to biggest, but they're oxbow lakes, they're all kind of like, they're all connected, you just get in the boat, cypress trees everywhere. What I want to show you here, and we're doing this, so this is larger water, up to 900 acres now from 40. We're doing this with incredibly low doses of product, and like too low, kind of, which I'll show you here in a second. Like we're kind of finding out what's too little. But this is in sediment phosphorus, right? So again, we're removing hundreds of thousands or 100,000 plus parts per billion of phosphorus out of the sediment. This is just an Ekman dredge, though. Similar to the video you saw earlier of the sediment probing. What you'll find is when you really start solving when you really are using this product, Trimarine, the muck will open up. You'll break through layers. And so we'll measure. And so on stave, last year I measured it at 4 foot of muck, 4 foot of water, 4 foot of muck out in Mills Lake. And then in October, I went back, 4 foot of water, 20 foot of muck, right? It's just the probe just like melts through the bottom. And these are offshoots of or former Mississippi River. So like I don't know how deep it is there, but it's over 24 foot deep, and I just couldn't push it any further. We'll see. That was a year ago, basically today. I'll be back there Monday and measuring and electrofishing and stuff. But just want to share with you the phosphorus in the sediment. Like this might only be the top 6, 8, 12 inches of sediment, but this is still like a big deal mobilizing this stuff. In water, a little different story. We went quickly down to around 100. This is way better. The lakes are far more, they're almost like more, I guess, manageable. They're less risk. But Menashe, we went the opposite direction, right? So we're higher now. And when we look at it, we only applied 1 part per million to this lake this whole year, Menashe. So in this blue section here, so 2024 Mink, we put in 18 parts per million. That's a 50-acre section of this system. And they flow from Mink to Menashe, the outflows on Menashe. So anyways, we know 1 part per million is not enough to reduce the phosphorus out of the water, but we do know that, and we put in 4 parts per million this year. So 4 parts per million, though, is still enough to bring us down to here in the sediment, the surface sediment, not the core, but the surface sediment. And so just kind of, the trend is really favorable. This is last spring to last summer, a little bit more balance to the food web there, a little more diversity. This is NP ratio, still not in good shape right now, but we were at 1.4, 1.2 in the beginning, and now we're at least in the upper single digits. And again, these are low doses, and part of the low dose isn't by desire. It's like what's reasonable. Like what can you afford to do, and how can you incrementally make change? This is a couple more slides here I want to show you. This is from Dr. Gobler. He's up in New York, in Long Island, Center of Clean Water for New York State. He'll be the first person publishing on this technology. I don't know when he's publishing, but soon. He'll be at NOMS in 3 weeks talking. I highly encourage you to watch. I'll actually be talking about some stuff at NOMS in a couple weeks as well. But what I want to show you is he removed 12 inches or 11.4 inches of muck. This is a 2-acre pond on campus, SUNY Stony Brook. But and this is with a drone they use to measure the muck, but noticeable degradation or decomposition of the organics. And he's got, again, I'm not going to steal his thunder. He's got a lot going into it. So I think I have 2 more slides here. Pricing, it totally is dependent. You can ease into it, or you can go in guns blazing and really make quick change. Because of that, the price varies tremendously. That 40-acre lake I shared with you, they spent about $750 an acre foot annually over 3 years. They're on finishing year 2, which is, I'm not saying it's cheap, but compared to the alternatives, it was actually very reasonable. The reason why they signed on for it was because compared to all the other options, it seemed reasonable. And that was with zero proof that the stuff worked yet. That was going off of trust and relationships. So, but if you're treating like a 1/4-acre pond, it might be $2,500 to treat a 1/4-acre pond, because the labor, you got to go there every 2 weeks and apply it. Like, I mean, it's a bunch of work, right? To do something every few weeks, and it's not for everybody. But on larger scales, right? If you get bigger, like if you're looking at restoring Lake Okeechobee and stuff like that, I think you get much lower, maybe even less than $300 an acre foot, but it's still expensive on those scales. But I think we're going to find out if it's worth it. We'll see what the demand is for it. The key is the scalability. The amount of product you need, like it's very minimal amount of product that you're putting out. And let me see if I can get something there. So I do think it's solid for deetrification. I know it is, but we still have to figure out how much harvesting of phosphorus needs to be done versus how much the system had hidden before that you just couldn't tell was as big of a problem. Like I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure we're going to have to remove phosphorus from some of these systems. I just don't know to what extent. But we are reducing COD, enables the food web. And it's not like you're just removing 100,000 parts per billion of phosphorus really quickly out of the sediment into the water, and there it is in the water. Like it's dropping in the water like at the same rate of speed or faster than it is in the sediment. And so there's a definite demand from the food web for the phosphorus. And we have some paper trails on that. Like we have some little breadcrumbs that we're following, trying to better understand where all that phosphorus is going so quickly. And a lot of that, I've got some very sizable projects going with aquaculture in Arkansas, right in Lonoke, capital of fish for the U.S. Fish farm, game fish at least. Not big trophy bass like Texas, but they grow a lot of the food you guys feed your big bass. They've got a lot of trials going with aquaculture because aquaculture is kind of my upbringing. So more to come on that. I think they're going to be able to paint the picture on where the phosphorus goes better than anybody because it's a controlled setting where you're harvesting the fish constantly and you're starting with a blank slate. It's not as complex, right? So we're improving ratios though. We're increasing water depth, biodiversity. I didn't share anything on biodiversity. We have a ton of data on plankton and benthic invertebrates. There's a lot of very good data behind all this. And anyways, it actually works in brackish water, salt water as well, which I haven't dabbled in that much. I still need to see it to believe it, but there's no reason to think that this won't work perfectly fine in complete, saltwater type applications. So with that said, I want to thank Fash. He's a big part of this. Susan, Dylan, and Haley. They play a big role in some of the data that we crunch. So thanks for your time. If you guys have questions, you can catch me today. I actually have to catch a flight though, not too long from now. And then Ben will be here as well.
All right, I've been asked to have a Q&A for our last two speakers. There's David, and so we'll go Riddell. He's online still? Okay. So just go question for Riddell or question for Beasley.
I have a question for David. David,
yeah,
you said it works in brackish water. I would think there's a huge opportunity for your product in power plants that have sediment, like down around the Houston area. You have brackish water for Houston Black Power, and then that water goes through their cooling ponds, then goes out into Trinity Bay, which is silted in. Trinity Bay is already silted in pretty bad, but I guess it was more of a suggestion to reach out.
Yeah, we'll probably just start with the sediment texture, sand, silt, clay, confirm that there is the organic matter there that you can make the influence. But yeah, I'll keep that in mind, and that's kind of why part of the discussion here, being here, is trying to figure out where the appetite is the strongest, because there's some great use cases, but maybe the desire isn't there. And we just need to find out where there's a desire so we can develop those partnerships and relationships and work through things.
We definitely want to partner with you on some different projects that are mainly ranch lakes with issues of, especially in high tree areas where the organics fall into the tributaries. Here, also heavy muck like what you were showing.
Right, and one of the things I didn't mention, but the tree health tends to decline, whether it's the sycamore trees or cypress trees, like very dependent on water, and they don't do well in pHs of 9 or higher, or probably even 8.5 or higher. Like they really, they can struggle. The blue-green algae kind of almost outcompete the trees in some ways. It's kind of incredible, some of that stuff, and there's a contagious effect to that. But we actually have some clients that we'll probably take care of just because of the tree concerns they have. Yeah, go ahead.
David, more of a practical question. So in Utah, most of our reservoirs are culinary or irrigation reservoirs. The level of trust we have with our water users is not as high as I'd like it to be. When we come to them and say, hey, we want to put a chemical in your water that's going to solve all your problems and help us manage fish, and they ask, what is it? And I give them a name, and then I say it's proprietary as to what it is. Is there a way that I can respond to them that isn't it's proprietary, that allows me to communicate to them that it is not impactful, regardless of the certification?
Yeah. Well, I probably push that question to the Trimarine team in that case of, they have those responses, right? Because to get their product into, I believe it was Minnesota. Yeah, I think Minnesota gave them, like, it was really hard to get through that process. And so they've had to navigate all that before. I haven't. Most of my stuff's been on the private side, and then the public folks I deal with, they happen to be in states where the problem is not big enough or something for them, that pushback isn't there. But certainly, probably with the proper NDA in place, they can tell you anything, right? But to find an answer that's suitable to the public. I would say this, and I'm not saying this is something that anybody should, this isn't a great philosophy to live by necessarily, but in my experience with the amount of good things it's doing and the way the diversity within the food web is, and these species like healthy water quality indicating species that are thriving in this environment, it almost makes me question, like, how could it be bad? Right. And I'm not saying that we should go by that. It's like, oh, trust me, this little plankton species says it's good. But when you see some of that, it starts reinforcing it. And then I think also talking with Dr. Gobler, because he's completely, like me, I'm not part of Trimarine. I just have had good experience with it. The Dr. Gobler can also provide, being in New York State. So he's been working. I mean, he got it into New York State. They're doing that test pond is in New York State, which is like, it's almost like a miracle that he's got that going on right now.
Question for both of you guys, actually. How does this product, how's it gonna pair with other treatments? So for instance, where my head is, we have a lake in our state that was almost completely choked out with hydrilla. We went in, you guys went in, it was a city sector thing. They went in with aquaball and killed back the hydrilla. Now we have all this organic matter that we just killed, and it was covering 80% of the lake. So is that a scenario where you can then go in with something like this to try to quickly take care of your new organic matter that you just get rid of the system? Or do you have competing products where you have to wait a period of time before you do any of that?
Yeah, I mean, really, you want to go first, or?
Sure, yeah. Just to confirm, this was a site with hydrilla and we're treating it and what to do afterwards to confirm.
Correct. Like, we went and killed the hydrilla, but now trying to get the lake into a healthier state. That's
Understood. Yeah, it's obviously not unusual to see an algae bloom or something to that effect post hydrilla treatment, because what you're doing is shifting the nutrients from the hydrilla back into the water column, and something wants to utilize that. So yeah, that would be a good opportunity to utilize probably CDOX as a means to bind the available nutrients that you have then released into the water column. And as a means of our product releasing oxygen, it will help to degrade any organics that is left over from that treatment.
Yeah, I'll just add to that also. Thanks, Riddle. I think some of it depends on the rhythm the lake is in. And anytime you're trying to fix a problem that nutrients are involved, you have your sunlight, right, water depth, the internal load, the external load, and all that. And I would just say if it's hydrilla, you're probably, hydrilla is going to come back next May or June. or are you, where are you? Oklahoma?
It actually
Yes.
hasn't come back very bad.
Right. And is it because the SECI reading is denser now, like you have lower visibility, or what caused it to not come back?
That I'm not sure.
Oh, is this so this is,
Ardmore City.
Ardmore, okay, yeah, okay, so I'm familiar with that one then. And so, in my experience with Ardmore in particular, it's not like, and I might be misspeaking here, so I apologize, but when I got exposed to that project, I got the sense that you weren't in that bad of a rhythm. It was just like kind of rearing its head, like for kind of the first time or second time ever.
Yeah.
It's not like you're in this perpetual state. And so I think the lake is just showing signs of, it's near that tipping point where it's about to go in a poor direction, or could go in a poor direction. It might not for another 20 years. I don't know, but like, I think your approach, when you look at the cost of restoring a lake, I don't think it would make sense to spend a ton of money on nutrient mitigation just right out the gate. I think I would try to understand what is the problem, and because if you spend $300,000 or something to treat hydrilla it's a lot of money, but if you might do it once every 8 years, it might be better than spending 3 or 4 million on restoring the lake when it didn't need restoration yet. And so, there's some things you can monitor. I think sediment health is a big thing. Like if you better understand the health of your sediments, you can kind of start to forecast the future, but I think you got to compare that to a lot of other stuff. So I don't, at the end of the day though, if the lake shows it's going to go in a rhythm of bad algae, then I would probably do something. But if it's just showing this rhythm of nuisance aquatic growth occasionally, I'd probably play whack-a-mole with the vegetation personally. It's until the toxin producers or the stakeholders or something like, get out of whack to where, but it's really the blue-green algae. Like, I think if lakes didn't produce blue-green algae, because that one's deep, right? Average depth like 20 foot or something, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's deep. Like, so you don't have an issue until you have blue-green algae probably.
Yeah, I mean, we had hydrilla rooted in 16 feet of water, the deepest we found it, but this year it's only around one spot after about 3 foot depth, it's gone.
Yeah.
So it really hasn't come back, but your two presentations is what got the thought process going. And, we manage fish populations. We're not out there taking sediment samples and stuff all the time, but we have this massive biomass that has just been killed off and is now on the bottom. So is it a ticking time bomb, so to speak, where something like this needs to be applied to get rid of it?
Well, I think it's, it'll tell you, the lake will tell you.
Yeah.
You don't need to forecast that because you're just experiencing these issues. And I'm not providing like advice here, really, like because at the end of the day, like if it flares up into blue-green algae, and if that's like catastrophic to the point where you should have taken precautionary measures, then you should consider precautionary measures now. But if it's like, hey, if we have a flare up and we can just run with it and, fly by the seat of our pants a little bit, then I'd probably go that route.
Yeah. We'd have other lakes, that have vegetation issues from time to time. So it's, I think fisheries management for a long time has been very reactionary. So how can we be proactive instead of just reacting to something that happened?
Yeah, well, and a lot of that, so the lot of stuff I do, it's like first, the data is not always glamorous, but like taking a data-driven approach is everything. And even if you don't know what to do with the data, if you just have good, solid data from reputable labs that you can then, or in-house labs, whatever it looks like to you guys, that you can then build on. Yeah, I would just say I would continue monitoring the situation. Because when we got off that call, Ben and I talked, it was like, this is not a good use of your money to spend it on restoring the lake with this. But I'm sure you have 20 other lakes in the state that could use it more or something. But to go back to on that one, not that everybody cares about this, but it's like with the whole oldest man-made lake or something in Oklahoma. Is that?
Ardmore City is?
Yeah.
No, Ardmore City is relatively new.
Okay.
We had some lakes in Oklahoma, probably thinking of Arbuckle as the oldest one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
We're not close there.
Any other questions? Unless Rito, do you have more to add to that?
No, that was good. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you. That's good stuff.
Thank you.
I'm thinking, missed a few years here lately, and it's like, this is great, catching up with the technology. So, And there you go, Doug.
All right, I want to just kind of let you know what's going to happen here. We're going to take a break. We got lunch just right around the corner, go around there, and there's a buffet line of Mexican food. Let's try to be back in here in 30 minutes at 10 after and resume this session, and then we'll wrap up the afternoon in here, and then just step out on the ponds after we finish up. Thanks, Reed.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now we're into our second workshop on sediment and how sediment turns. No, yeah, no, we did, how sediment turns muck and creates unproductive water bodies. So our first speaker is Todd Rutherford.
Close enough.
Uh,
Been called a lot worse.
He's gonna talk to us about Sequel 4 of Tyler, Texas, providing insights to excavation of sediments in aquatic systems. So let's give it up for Todd.
Well, I went to Oklahoma State, so I majored in social studies. I'm not like most of the biologists in the room, so please bear with me. I'm just a good old hard worker fellow. We have a excavation and a dredge division, and we also build and manage lakes. I'm a little. So to talk a little bit about our company, we started out in the construction world building lakes. Largest lake we built is 75 acres. For a company like us, that's a pretty large lake. We also had worked in duck preservations in Oklahoma and helped back flood with federal grant money to create duck habitat, etc. So we're going to talk a little bit today about who we are. That's my grandson. Very important that you know that where he caught that fish was just right outside his door. We were honored to be invited by Doug and Steve to be here today. And I would like to tell you that I cannot thank you guys enough for inviting us. We in our industry are learning a ton today from the speakers that have presented, and that helps me, I think, do a better job in representing our company and our customers. But when we did this lake, we came in with the purpose of doing hydraulic dredging. That's where we do hydraulic dredging versus mechanical. And we ended up doing mechanical versus hydraulic because hydraulic dredging is quite frankly very expensive. And it's expensive for a couple reasons. The bags and the dewatering bags that you use and the flocculant can drive those costs up. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. We perform vegetation removal. We do a lot of that in East Texas where we remove hydrilla. I heard you guys talking about hydrilla. We do cattails can become a very serious problem in a lake and take over. They're a tubular plant, so if you don't get down into the dirt to get the tube, they'll return. They still return because the tubes will float and drip. But we've done a lot of that here on Lake Athens because they have a serious cattail problem. We perform shoreline restoration. We do anywhere from bulkhead to backfill, and we also use a product called SOX. That's a company out of Florida, very unique. It's very similar to the same dewatering bag that we use. The dewatering bag and the SOX product is a geotextile fabric. That geotextile fabric allows a micron size to go through and back into the lake. So we don't use dewatering bags. You would think, well, and we represent two companies. We represent EnviroTubes out of Louisiana, and we represent SOX out of Florida. If you talk to EnviroTube, they're going to tell you they're a better product for shoreline restoration. If you talk to SOX, they're going to tell you they're a better shoreline restoration product. They both work. We've used both. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. The disadvantage of using the dewatering bag is it causes lumps and can cause, you don't get the uniform shape going down into the pond like what you'll see some of that over on the not Zepco, but the Syntex pond has some SOX on it on this east side. We'll talk about that in a little bit and I'll show you some pictures. We construct fish habitat in new lakes and ponds. We do a lot of work with ranches. We build reservoirs or ponds for all kinds of things. We do it for livestock. Some people don't care about fishing. They just want to get water for their animals. But mostly our projects are driven towards fishermen, and people wanting fishing lakes on their ranches. Obviously, what I'm going to talk about today is the problems with sedimentation. We see this, we work in urban markets, Dallas, we work in Fort Worth, we've worked in Houston. And what you see in the urban markets is you see a big problem with sedimentation and runoff from roads. You have that problem, quite frankly, here on this road and back down in this neighborhood. If a neighborhood builds and they have roads and those roads runoff runs into a tributary that runs into a lake or a pond at a subdivision, it can absolutely destroy it. South Lake Dallas, we rebuilt a 15-acre lake there that had to be drained to remove all the sedimentation out of it. But what happens is sedimentation can cause other problems. You heard him talk about Chesapeake Bay. Sedimentation can cause equilibrium problems for the dam. So when you get a large rainfall and you have too much sedimentation, the dam can't handle the water rising fast enough because it doesn't have enough freeboard on the dam or enough depth during a dry season. So what happened in South Lake, the sedimentation had probably, it was about a 7-foot sedimentation built up because South Lake had explosive growth in the subdivisions. As a result, all the runoff was hitting the tributaries and it was going into this neighborhood lake. This neighborhood lake did not have the ability to manage a heavy rainfall any longer because in Texas, you have seasons where it goes dry. And you will have the evaporation where the lake goes down, the heavy rainfall comes in and brings it back up. Well, if the sedimentation's there and you don't have evaporation, you lose freeboard capabilities, and then your runoff by developing new neighborhoods, new parking lots, new shopping centers, the watershed compounds itself. So where a lake used to could handle 3 feet of freeboard, and that is the top of the dam to the water level, and a 10-inch rain or a 4-inch rain come in, that watershed increases significantly as a result of all of the urban development. Well, the watershed comes in extremely rapid. When it comes in extremely rapid and it has exponentially grown because of watershed growth, that pond cannot, or that lake cannot handle that input. Therefore, we come in usually after the dam is busted and we have to reconstruct the lake. So we do a few things. We do a study to see what the watershed is. We do a study to see what the economics when the lake was built. We do a study when it was today. We look at the watershed of parking and roads and culverts and how the tributaries are increasing consumption so that we know how much freeboard this lake needs to have and how big the spillway needs to be to create relief. So we do a little bit of science. I'll just tell you, we do it the Aggie way because we're Oklahoma State Cowboy and we use, believe it or not, Texas A&M's research more than Oklahoma State, but don't tell my OSU friends that. The organic matter breakdown over time, you've heard all the biologists and the experts speak about it, but we see a lot of lake cleanup as a result of the organic matter building up. We call it black water, and that's probably the wrong term, but what happens is when the organic matter builds up, you can tell by looking at a lake if it's leaves, if it's decomposing, if it's causing some serious muck at the bottom. The water will begin to almost turn black in some of these ranches. You saw that in ones that you showed that had the cypress trees. That water was pretty bad. If you noticed in his hand what he was holding, the muck, it was extremely black. And in shallower depths, it can actually turn the water to a black, almost sewer looking type water source. Anyways, it's a big problem. Bigger problem than I realized after hearing talk about the lakes and the aging of them and then the sediments coming and building up that the gentleman from Arkansas, give me your name again.
Reed was extremely impressed by your presentation, by the way, and learning about the different flows of and causes of sedimentation across the lakes in this country. So this is kind of what you heard everyone talking about, is the accumulation of decaying organic materials. The pond sediment turns to mud due to the accumulation of decaying organic materials such as fallen leaves, dead algae, fish waste, and uneaten food. Over time, these materials settle, decompose, and anaerobically create a thick, dark sludge. The presence of excess muck can have several negative impacts to your pond's health, including reduced dissolved oxygen levels, nutrient release, foul odors, and degradation of a habitat for the beneficial bottom-dwelling organisms. To manage muck effectively, it is essential to understand its causes and use targeted treatments like beneficial bacteria treatments, aeration systems, and manual dredging. We come in and we do use some of the bacteria treatments. We're probably going to use some of the vendors that we've seen today because I was very impressed by their products. But at many times we come in with manual dredging, whether it be aerobic or whether it be mechanical. So the same drivers that contribute to sediment also cause shoreline erosion. I'm going to talk a little bit about shoreline erosion as well. The water runoff into a lake erodes the shoreline at the same time that it's bringing in sediment into the lake. The rain, we see direct watersheds, especially in heavy rainfall, causing shoreline erosion. The slope and grade contribute to your shoreline erosion. So depending on how the lake was built or what the pond is that you have, if it's not shaped properly for the watershed and the water volume that you get in rainfall in your area, can cause more shoreline erosion than you need. So we can do shoreline, rebuilds. But the runoff entry points can also occur. The sides of the water bodies, the water inlet point, and the spillway outlet. Those are your primary areas that you see sediment build up. However, I learned something today when they talked about the temperatures of the water, because as we specialize in hydraulic dredging, what we've learned is that a micron in sediment determines how small it is. So in your dewatering bags, the smallest micron that you want to go out in a dewatering bag is you want it to look like drinking water as it enters back into the lake during dredging. Doesn't always look that way, because if you get it that clean, sometimes you're putting too much flocculant into the bag with your water coming in and can cause too much of a buildup on a fish's gills, which can cause a fish kill. So you have to manage the type of muck. We send it to a laboratory, we have it studied, we understand what it is, and then we determine what flocculant you can use to do the dredging, so that the water going back into the lake is as clean as it can be, but also doesn't have any toxicity in it that could cause any fish kill. So it was interesting to learn that the water temperature, and that's what we see it in the entry points, heavier sediment, similar to sand, especially in runoffs around dry, roads, etc. We had a lot of sand in these ponds, primarily coming off these parking lots up here at the main entry center. That water runoff is coming down this stream, bringing a significant amount of sand into the zip code right here where they're fishing. And so as we get deeper into lakes, like at Lake Athens, this lake has a deep side and a high side, and in the shallow side, if you will, people want to get a boat out, and they can't get their, one of our benefits is we don't just help fishermen, we help wakeboarders, because they have those boats that carry a pretty big draft. So they want a lane cut. We not only drain or clean out around the boat docks, but we'll cut lane into the deeper water for them. And what we find is, the closer you are in the shoreline, you're getting into a sand and mud material. But when you get further out, you're getting into the sludge. You're getting into the material like you saw in the boat, where the
gentlemen were sticking the probe down in the middle of the lake in Arkansas, I believe it was. And it was a black, dark gray sludge. That's because that's a smaller micron that's being carried in that water based on the temperature farther out into the lake center and settling on bottom. And so we see that when we work in Lake Athens or Lake Palestine or Lake Conroe, Lake Texoma, etc. How we can help. We can offer consulting and study what your problem is with the lake. We possess equipment and expertise to correcting existing ponds as well as new build. We're a shoreline expert with SOx erosion control. We prepare resolution plans to mitigate existing issues that you may have, and we can do hydraulic or mechanical dredge as well as vegetation removal. Here are a few ponds that we've done. We clean out, we construct, clean out, deepen slips, create cuts in deeper water. We also do major projects like we did with the Army Corps of Engineers over on Lake Toledo Bend. Lake Toledo Bend, when it was flooded, used to be a big logging area. So a lot of the creeks and offshoots of Toledo Bend were actually used for logging. So they cut the trees, they floated them down those thoroughfares of water, and then they would take the logs to the lumber yards. Well, when Toledo Bend was built, they flooded it, and when they flooded it, a lot of those tributaries are still there, and people built homes on them, and they used those old logging channels to get into Toledo Bend for fishing. The Army Corps Engineer had a log jam in one of those main thoroughfares that was about, I'm going to say, 1,000 feet of log jam. There was several major neighborhoods that were impacted, and the Army Corps of Engineers was continual getting complaints from those neighborhoods and those homeowners. When are you going to fix it? When are you going to fix it? So they called us. We went in to fix it, and we were hired. The project was really interesting. Have you ever seen a mechanical dredge on pontoons with tracks? Anybody ever seen those? Okay, so ours, if you're standing next to them, the pontoon is probably 8 to 10 feet tall with the track from the excavator rolling around it. Now these machines, they're not cheap. They do float. If you can imagine a 320 cat excavator floating. They don't, you think the tracks would paddle them across if they get in water over their track depth, but they don't. You'll see them using their arm to pull themselves to where the working location is. Very interesting machine. This is over here on the left is one. This one is actually a pretty small pontoon, but if you were standing next to it, your head would be about right there. That is about a 10-foot pontoon on that cat excavator. And then there's the excavator that you'd use on mechanical. The amphibious projects are the ones we used on Toledo Bend. We opened up a log jam, like I said, I think it was 1,000 to 1,500 feet long. And that was a great project. We enjoyed doing that one. Obviously, every night when we came out of the project, the neighborhood people were actually meeting us at the boat ramps going, when, how much longer before we can get to fishing water? Because most of the people live on lakes so they can fish. So, this is a hydraulic dredge like we own. We've had up to 3 and 4 of these in our equipment yard before. Right now, I think we're running 2 machines. The interesting thing is you notice how clean the water is coming out of this dewatering bag. This can reach down 13 feet. So we can dredge up to 13 feet. That is like a ditch witch head. Actually, it's ditch witch teeth. This machine, the reason it's called a Dino 6, the gentleman that invented it was Dean. Dean was a large excavation and dredge expert down on the coastlines of Texas. He'd gone all over the country, Chesapeake, New York, Harbor. San Francisco was an expert. Dean decided that there needed to be something that worked in a smaller scale for ranch ponds. We do a lot of stuff for golf courses. It's good for water treatment plants, and it's also used for fisheries. In fact, we sold a machine that's in Utah now. Curious to talk to the guys from Utah if they're using one of these on their fisheries, because one we sent up there is cleaning out fisheries in Utah now. But you don't see this on this bag, but there's usually a mixing box up at the top of the input hose that enters a flocculant, and the flocculant goes into the dewatering bag. The dewatering bag then allows a certain micron to come out. That's why if we did a lake for you, we take a sampling of the muck. It is sent to a lab in Houston. They then determine what flocculant best can create the micron size to go back in clean water into the lake. So this is a SOx erosion shoreline control product. It's the same thing. Those dewatering bags are usually this color or black. This is the exact same product. It is a geotextile fabric. The difference in it is that bag only has one entry point. So if you continue to pump silt and muck or sand into it, it can get like lumpy. This approach, you actually stake it back and you wash the sand into it. You have a bottom, it's like a taco, if you will. This rope's going to be coming off the bottom. This rope's going to be coming off the top. You wash the sand in it to get the shape and contour of the shoreline restoration you want. And then you actually sew the ends together with a hand sewing machine, and you basically build it on site so that you get the contour you want. Once the sand is built back up, you then lay the sod over it like what you see over here. And that is the product that you'll see on the east side of the lake over here when we do the tour. I'm sure Tom will point that out. But as you can see, it creates a very aesthetic pleasing kind of shoreline with the grass placed back on it. We do a lot of it at golf courses and places of that nature. That's it. So mine's pretty short and sweet.
Any questions?
We can do a joint Q&A.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna do it right after the end. Okay, yeah. So next we got Ryan Sullivan from Biobase, and he's gonna talk to us about, I'll tell you, I can't read it. I want to tell you that, you know, the post, push poles, I sent all that to Ray.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, 'cause I had a Lawrence with us. Yeah, I don't know what happened with it.
Doug, can you see the presentation on there?
Yes.
Perfect.
Should be good. And then that's a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. My name is Ryan with Biobase, and we're gonna learn about sonar today. So there are two types of sonar. The first one we're gonna talk about is passive sonar. Passive sonar is basically listening without transmitting. And what they do is they put in a hydrophone into the water, and you just pick up any noise from the environment. Has anybody heard of the SOFAR channel? Well, it's a really cool sound capturing channel that happens in the ocean. And this is how we were able to listen during World War II over long distances. Once they figured this out, they also figured out they could send a lot of stuff over long distances. It's just a little fun fact for you there. But what we're going to talk about is active sonar. Active sonar is most effective for locating objects underneath the water. It sends out a pulse, and then it travels through the water, reflects off the object you want to find, and then gets read by the transducer. The benefit of active sonar versus passive is it can detect objects that are too quiet to be detected using passive sonar. So how much noise does a fish make underwater? I'm not sure. I'm not a fisheries guy, but you guys probably know. At least I don't think it's a lot. The active sonar you see in movies and TVs, where you're in a submarine, that sends out a sound wave of about 235 decibels. So if you were really close to that, you would be severely injured. And for reference, a loud rock concert is 130 decibels. So we're not talking about any of that kind of sonar. We're going to be talking about fish finders and other off-the-shelf solutions that use kilohertz to measure the intensity of sonar. So this is a look at that sonar channels that we're talking about. Here we go. Yeah. So on the left, you have your primary channel. It's also called broadband, traditional. Depends on what brand you have. Lowrance, Humminbird, Garmin, they all call it something different. But it all kind of looks the same. You got a pretty uniform color scheme with it. It has a lower definition, but a longer range, and allows you to pull bottom composition out of that data. On the other side, we have downscan or structure scan, clear view, again, depending on what brand you're looking at. That's going to be the higher end of that frequency range, and it's going to give you higher definition at the sacrifice of range. And that's just what it looks like there on your screen when you see it in the sonar. So just to kind of touch base again with this one, low frequency, it's going to be that 50 to 200 kilohertz. It produces a longer wave with less frequent sound waves. It's less sensitive to small objects and small fish. So if you're looking for a specific habitat or a specific fish, you might want to switch over to the downscan for that. This is going to be really good for getting those deeper areas of the lake and figuring out your bottom composition. So the high frequency, it produces a shorter, more frequent sound wave, but delivers superior image resolution, but at the sacrifice of depth. So I'm not sure how deep some of these reservoirs are, but as you can see, it goes pretty far, but it might not reach the bottom of some of them, depending on where you are. So the trade-off of this one is, you have that really good clarity, but it sacrifices the depth that you can see everything at. And then we're going to touch base on multi-beam sonar. So on the left here, you see single beam map output, and on the right, you'll see a multi-beam output. This is provided by Lake Tech. So the multi-beam systems are exactly what it sounds like. It's just multiple single beams put together. It offers a comprehensive, high-resolution underwater view of that water body. It's ideal for formal hydrographic surveys. So if you're building a bridge, you're building a dock, or some sort of inlet construction, you might need to use multi-beam sonar. And there are some advantages to it. You have rapid data acquisition over a large area. This is what they use to measure and map the ocean floors. And it's really good at deep water surveys. This is what that point cloud would look like from a multi-beam system. So you basically take this and you apply some processing to it, and you can create your map that way. So this is basically collected from a bunch of single beam sonars in an array and collected all at the same time. So let's just compare the two. So your single beam, it's going to be way more cost effective. Anywhere between $500 to $2,500, depending on which brand and which model you get. It's simple, easy to use. You only get single point data out of it. And that single point data requires interpolation and extrapolation to create that data cloud that we saw with the multi-beam. Multi-beam does it automatically. It's used generally for recreational and research purposes, just because of the cost. The multi-beam, that system that mapped that lake previous that you saw the comparison, was about $40,000 just for this unit. And then you don't even count the software and the processing after that, which is extremely expensive as well, because you have to apply a lot of post-processing fixes, as well as it requires multiple attitude sensors. So you need to account for a pitch, yaw, anything that happens to that boat while it's on the water, and then cleanse that data for that. So we're just going to go back to single beam. That's where we're going to talk about the rest of the presentation. This says Lowrance 3-in-1 transducer. That doesn't mean it has 3 beams in it. It's just the 3 channels and that frequency that we're talking about. So I did say single beam. This is technically a single beam with multiple channels in it. So the 2D sonar, again, that's going to be your primary channel, that lower wavelength, your downscan, and then the side scan is actually included in the downscan channel. So the first thing we're going to talk about with depth tracking and bathymetry, this is one of the hardest things for algorithms to do. So what actually happens is we're looking at the actual decibel reflection of the sound wave that gets returned to the transducer in an electrical signal. So that's how we're pulling this depth data from that sonar signal itself. We have an algorithm that will process that sonar imagery and reads this amplitude on that return. And then this is what it looks like here. That flashlight beam or that circle beam here is that primary channel. The green line you see right there, that's going to be your downscan channel. That's going to be more like a copy scanner beam. And then one of the questions we get asked most is, how wide is that beam when it hits the bottom? And I hate to give this answer, but it's the best one I have, and it depends. And it depends on your depth. So to find your acoustic footprint, you just use this equation, your depth times your tangent theta, and then you multiply that by 2. Your tangent theta is going to be the beam angle of your sonar equipment. There's varying beam angles depending on what model you have. The Lowrance 3-in-1 is a 20-degree beam angle. We saw that one earlier, so we use that in this example. So for a 20-degree beam cone, we'll take half of that, which is your theta of 10. So at 5 feet deep, that beam is only covering 3.5 feet. So just extrapolate that out to whatever depth you are at. You can see that really good in this picture here. So the deeper that is, the wider that cone becomes in your primary channel. Here's a look at that same depth detection, but this side has a vegetated bottom. So you can see the difference in the decibel reading on that as that signal passes through that vegetation, and that return difference here. So there's a really hard bottom, a really strong return. And then you have that really kind of weaker area right here where that signal would pick up the bottom at. So you can see the difference in the two and how hard it is to calculate the depth detection. Here's a visual look at it inside the BioBase platform. So these red tick marks are going to be where that beam and where that software picks up that detection. And then the green is going to be your tops of vegetation detection. So it takes a look at both of those signal changes and applies those points respectively. The next thing is bottom hardness or bottom composition. So for example, Reef Master right here, they look at the peak SV, the first echo, and the second echo. Most of the bottom composition algorithms will look at the second echo and use their algorithms to process that, just like BioBase. I'll get into that in a little bit. But when we get into these other companies' algorithms, it's all really proprietary. So I can only use like what I know and what they put out. But this is Reef Master here. And they're basically correlating the hardness between the first echo and the second echo while incorporating the peak SV into it. So different processing platforms use different algorithms to calculate and interpolate bottom hardness. So how BioBase does it is it's determined by the relative strength of that second echo. A strong second echo generally indicates a harder bottom or a rock or sand or gravel, something that can allow that signal to have a strong return. A soft bottom, as we were talking about earlier, the muck and that silt, typically absorbs more of that acoustic energy, so there isn't a reflection back to the bottom of the boat or the transducer to get that second echo. And here's a look at what that looks like. So you see you have your depth right here, and then what BioBase is actually doing is comparing these two lines or these 2 point clouds to create that relative bottom hardness number. So in the harder areas where you see these like peaks, that point cluster really tightens up, and then that second echo really follows it. that's gonna be your harder bottom, that's gonna be your higher number, because there's more relation to those two signals. And then when you get into like the trough area here where there's softer sediments, you see that data start to spread out. And that relationship is gonna give you the relative hardness of the bottom there. Here's a look at it inside the BioBase platform and a little look on the sonar here. So when you're out there using your own sonar, you know what to look for. So here's a hard bottom. So right at the top of this like hill here, we're moving in this direction through this trough here. You have that really strong second echo, and that second echo is always going to be twice the depth of your sonar reading, because it bounces off the bottom, comes back up, gets read as depth, and then bounces again, and it gets read as that second echo. So if you're not set up to see that depth right there on that second channel or the second echo, you won't be able to extract that data out of the channel. But what we're looking at here is that hard bottom first. It's got a really strong second echo. So as it goes over this hill here, got a really strong second echo that follows it. And then as we get into the trough here, if you see that yellow line thicken up, and then you lose that second echo as we get into those softer sediments. And you can see that on the map here. You got those hard gravel boulders going into that medium sand area, into the tan soft mud area. This is a look at that single beam data on bottom hardness overlaid to a multi-beam data. So you can see it's really accurate. Where there's rocky areas, where there's a rough bottom, you get that harder red number. And then where it's softer in this channel and a lot muddier, you get these blue dots where it's a lot softer. So it's very accurate. So now we're going to take a look at the vegetation detection. So again, it goes back to the depth detection. What we're looking at here is that change in the acoustic signal. And we're looking for that top of vegetation relative to the bottom return. And how BioBase does it is it calculates biovolume. So it's basically going to look at the entire depth. It's going to pick that top of vegetation and then calculate the plant height for you and give you a biovolume for that area. As the acoustic signal travels through those submerged vegetation canopies, the bottom typically, returns the sharper. If it doesn't, you'll tend to have the depth creep up into the canopy, and you'll have to do some post-processing fixes on that. No vegetation or depth detection algorithm is perfect, so it does happen. And most platforms have some sort of post-processing editing or fixing that can occur inside the platform to fix all this. So here's another visual look. That's the quiet zone. So you need a really strong quiet zone. If you don't, you can tend to have that top of vegetation leak into that quiet zone, especially if you have an improperly installed transducer and stuff, which is I'll talk about more tomorrow in my talk. And here's another visual look at that. So get that top of vegetation canopy and then that bottom return there. So we talked about all the sonar, but how's the data created from this? Well, there's a bunch of different algorithms out there. The sonar file goes through this algorithm process where the acoustic features are extracted from that and then synchronized with the GPS coordinates. The timing parameters are different for each equipment manufacturer and each algorithm that you process it through. The pulse width remains automatically controlled by the system. That's that signal depth that we were talking about and that number of pulses. And then each sonar processing platform uses a proprietary algorithm to interpret its acoustic signals and generate the maps. I can only talk about how BioBase does it. A lot of platforms have some sort of data filtering involved in it as well. This is going to automatically filter or cleanse out any bad data, or if you just sit in one spot and you collect the same data over and over and over again. So you don't have a data overload in that area, you just cleanse out that stuff that's all relatively the same. And then there are a ton of different settings involved in all these platforms that allow you to change those cleansing methods. So how is a map created? So we're going to talk about the point data. So this is how we pull all of that point data. This is from Lake X. This is Mercury Marine's test lake down in Florida. We're looking at depth here. So the red areas are going to be your deeper areas. The blue areas are going to be your shallower areas. This is just single point data that was extracted from the sonar imagery, like we saw earlier, looking at the changes in that signal return and the depth data. Then it goes through a creating process. Now, this is proprietary. We can give you so much if you're looking for to using bio-based research. We do have a formal paper that we can provide you that goes just enough into it to give you like a good research and source, but not enough to where somebody else can pick out the entire equation. But basically, creating is just looking at areas of unsampled location and predicting what's going to be there based on the neighboring locations or neighboring points. Because everybody knows the rural geography. Stuff that's closer together is more alike than stuff that's further apart. So you do look at the points next to it, and they get a stronger percentage of what's most likely there versus what's further away. So after it goes through the creating process, it's converted into grid data. So again, if you had a multi-beam system, would already do that for you, but since we don't, this is going to be an interpolated point data to a grid data. So this grid data here is basically that creating process on just that single line of point data. And then from there, you can rasterize it and make a map output. So here's a look at that outputted map there. But not only can you do vegetation, bottom composition, and depth, you can now do fish out of that same sonar channel. So EcoFish is the first of its kind to repurpose consumer grade hardware and remove the friction of creating that map. This includes habitat data alongside fish data, so you can start to show those really good relationships between habitat and fish and how they work together, because you can't protect and manage what you don't measure. So we go a little bit into how it works. So the raw sonar image and the fish arches in the schools you can see here in this data here, or the sonar image, it goes through this process. So the first, it takes that raw sonar image, it does some image segmentation to it, and then cleanses out and excludes anything that it's not confident is a fish return. And then it gets overlaid back into that raw sonar imagery to provide you a better look at it. So then you're also thinking, what about these? Well, that's fish, maybe, but the software isn't sure enough to say, yep, confidently that's a fish. This is backed by EcoView software, and they've had 20 years of experience plus in the marine industry to extract fish data. So we kind of have to rely on them a little bit in terms of why those weren't there. We are working on some dials that you can turn to kind of change these settings a little bit to pick up these smaller areas or bigger fish, depending on which channel you're using and stuff like that. So I'm going to show you some real world examples and some insights we can pull from that. So, let's think about the big questions, when we're looking at this is, where are the fish and why are they there? How are they interacting with the habitat? And can you start to connect these fish distributions directly to depth, vegetation, and bottom composition? So what we're looking at here is that outputted EcoFish map. So these yellow areas are going to be your higher density fish. And you can see here, we have that warm water fish, and then sometimes the trout right at the top here. We have this really defined thermocline. And then we have the hypolimnium down here. What we're going to talk about here is that suicide squeeze. I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with it, but you have these trout that likes to live along that thermocline edge. And you can see that here in the automated report that gets generated from a bio-based trip. So you have that two distinct fish zone occupations. You have that shallow area, and then you have the deeper area where all those trout were. And this is all from that map here. We can also provide you with the number of fish that gets picked up, so you can start to count fish inside lake and reservoirs, and it also gives you a size metric as well. So you can see how many small, how many medium, and how many large. What was their depth range at? So they found fish between 5 and 58 feet with an average depth of 21.5. And then also built into it is school detection. So you could see 133 different schools were picked up during this and their average depth as well. So we're going to take a look at these two distinct fish zones and look what happens when you take multiple trips along the same water body over the entire season. You can start to see that histogram come together, and as summer goes through, the water gets warmer, the warmer water goes deeper, too many nutrients are going into the lake and depleting the oxygen. So then you get this fish kill or that late summer suicide squeeze. So you can start to track that in that histogram right here, and then take action before you have any major issues. Here's another look at two different lakes. Both of these lakes experienced a fish kill, but both tell a completely different story. You can see here on the left, there's not a lot of fish there. There's a little bit, maybe survivors right there, but that's about it. And then on the right here, you have a lot of survivors. This is actually where there's an oxygenation system as well. So you can start to see where all those fish went to seek refuge from that fish kill. So now you can start to say, hey, you don't have total fish loss. There's still fish in there. Or, yep, you have total fish loss. We need to take, these corrective actions. So now you can start measuring the success of the things you put into the water to help with your fisheries management. So here's an aeration system, and then you could see all of the fish seeking refuge around that aeration system, and all of them right here in the deeper water where all those diffusers are. Here's a look at ugly tree fish habitat. So you got that artificial habitat here, this is thanks to Stephen Barton. And then you got those fish detections in that habitat. So you can start to tell now that your installed habitat is working and is being effective. And then here's a mossback habitat. I believe this one is designed to bring in schools of bait fish. And you can see that detection right there along that mossback habitat. Any questions? Yeah.
On your single point data, I have 180,000 surface acre reservoir. How much percentage of the reservoir do I need to zigzag through to be confident?
So I hate to give this answer because it's the same as the other one, but it depends. It depends on your project. It depends on what you're looking at. It depends on what you're doing it for. It depends on how much change there is in the reservoir. For example, Florida lakes, with my experience, is there's not a lot of happening in the middle of them. Everything's happening around that first 6 feet. So when you get to the middle, you can spread those transects apart. You can go faster, but you really want to get a detailed look around the outside of the lake there. So we have a whole webinar on transect design, and it gives you all the parameters, what to look for, what to think about, and how to tackle something like that. The more change you have in the bottom, the slower you should go, the more data you should collect, the closer those transects could be. And then in that webinar, we actually show you like the difference between a 16-meter transect and a 10-meter transect. And there's less than 5% in terms of biovolume detection and average biovolume between the two. So it's really good at interpolation. So
What is a slow and fast speed and ballpark?
You're gonna hate this, it depends. It depends on your boat, depends on your setup. Biobase has some cleansing that happens after a certain speed. So like if you're going over 20 miles an hour, it cleanses it because it's like, nope, you're going too fast. Somewhere between 3 miles an hour to 7 or 8 is like a really good range. What you want to look at is your sonar imagery. So if you're getting good sonar ratings, you're getting good depth returns, you're getting, a good look on that sonar image, you're collecting good depth. So you can either speed up or slow down depending on how that image looks, and then your time frame.
Yeah. Some of the big things, like I think in our state anyway, we're looking at is doing more of an approach for the watershed, cleaning up the watershed and seeing how much sediment maybe we can stop in the kind of water body.
Mm-hmm.
I know you can track a lot of your stuff. Is there plans for the future to maybe like track, say, hey, your water body has gained this much sediment over 5 years or 10 years to do the same type of survey?
Yeah, so built into Biobase is exporting features. So we have the ability to export those bottom composition shape files or depth shape files. and put those into GIS software, and then you can do your conversions there, your difference maps there. We do have a GIS services guy that can do it for you if you don't have a GIS department. But you can take multiple surveys over the course of a year, years, and then we can look at the difference and the changes in the depth and bottom composition and show you where you have sedimentation occurring and where you don't. It's probably really great for, before and after with dredging, because you can start to get that numerical data of, yep, we pulled out this much and your water volume increased by this much.
Is there a way to adjust for lake elevation here, your mapping?
Yeah, so if you're trying to put it into like a real world scenario, we have offsetting features inside the platform that can offset your entire data set to a specific elevation. You'll need to take some like real-time measurements, see where it is comparatively, and then adjust that accordingly, but yeah.
And then how does, with the vegetation mapping and bottom harvest, how do stobs affect that?
How do what?
Stobs, like the trunks and we have some lakes that are just covered with old trees. Does that affect it with the red's vegetation, or how does that show up with something like that?
It depends on the return, the speed you're going at, the composition of the wood, but you're most likely going to get a hard reading from that versus the soft reading. The soft readings are going to be more your mucky sediments.
Right, okay.
So you're going to get like vegetation or habitat. What you would probably use BioVis for then would be the side scan mosaic, and you can start to correlate those areas where you have that really hard bottom and say, hey, looking at the side scan data on the same survey, we have these, wood features here instead of it just being a rock. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you. Questions for Todd?
I just think it's gonna be young. No question.
All right. That's bio-based, Ray Valley and I go back a long time, and so when he was first developing this stuff, I was playing around in Hot Springs Village Lakes in Arkansas on my fishing kayak. And I knew the lake manager there, and so I mapped a number of those lakes and the hard surfaces, soft surfaces, and that kind of stuff, and it's really neat. Move on to the last.
Jim is next.
Okay, we're doing hard habitat. I got my glasses on. Next speaker is Larry Beggs and James McFarland, Reef Innovations, Inc. So.
All right, here I am. Do I need a microphone? I'm probably loud enough. If not, just somebody put it in the ear, I'll grab the microphone. I'm Jim McFarland. Larry's not here. He had his tent stuck up there in the park on Friday, but he's doing great. Most of you deal with him more than you deal with me because I'm around for consulting, answering questions and conceptual ideas. And he's the one that really gets the job done or gets reef balls to you. How many of you know what a reef ball is? How many of you can explain why the holes are shaped like they are? Hey, that's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's something like that. Starting with, I'm thinking of habitat. Because that's my topic here, it's hard habitat. But I also think of a design structure that caused the hard habitat. Reef ball started way back, 31 years ago. I started researching reef balls when I saw them, looking, how do I get these things in my habitat? At that point in time, it wasn't saltwater habitat, and looking at it and saying, all right, that has some characteristics. It maybe looks like it belongs in an offshore reef. And it really still does look like it belongs in an offshore reef. Originally designed for coral. Calcium carbonate base. We already heard Dave this morning talking about calcium carbonate. It's got some importance in it. And that takes back to one of the first studies that I looked at. It's got eddy currents created as wave action comes through it, as motion of water comes through it. And Lee Harris writes on that in an Army Corps of Engineers study, causes consolidation of calcium carbonate particles, precipitating out of water solution, saltwater environment, but some of that's then when we're looking at our sediment. So this whole thing is as we look at hard structure, is it gonna fit into the environment? Is it gonna provide habitat? Is it gonna do something as far as sedimentation? Will it reduce turbidity? Will it provide a complex reef structure? More than just a simple individual design. Again, more studies I've been through over the years, looking at those researches of complex reef structure. Are the holes the same size, openings the same size? Are we varying? As you look at the display on the table, they're arranged in some different sizes. As reef balls could come in a hard structure that's 9 inches on up to our super reef structures that are over 7.5 feet high, connected in 4 modules with other units that are articulating that. That's rather complex reef structure. But think about setting that in the water, in 10 foot of water, 300 yards long. That's even building a more complex structure. Why that really comes into wave action. So whether it's our shoreline habitat, we're trying to protect a shoreline. We want that nature, ability of nature coming in, and you want the grasses along the shoreline, but the wave action stopping it. I've called wakeboarding for a long time. Boy, are the waves nice. And I saw on the site this past week, a great study of that wave action. Because that's been one of my studies a long time. The wave in deeper water is more than what most people are realizing. The structure of putting a reef ball setup, a hard structure that is known from research to absorb wave action in deeper water will cause more scouring and particle development and movement of things along the bottom, but not that turbid cloud rising. That's occurred everywhere. If I hadn't dove on it myself, looking at it and studying in 30 foot of water, what's happening with 6 foot waves on the top and bottom of that structure, I might wonder, what is there? So as you look again at hard structure and building some sort of habitat, we also have to look on porosity. Will water flow through it? That's a key factor. These reef balls, as you look at them, they have a strange looking hole. That's part of how it was built. And I'm not so certain that the team that was developing this, Todd Barber, the leader of that back 35 years ago, was thinking about that as much as building something that you could build anywhere, because you got a fiberglass mold, you got plastic balls, you've got concrete material, you've got nothing that's gonna harm the environment. And that's a true test on a habitat, is there's no metals. Corals will grow on it. And one thing was brought up is this whole structure, we want fish, we want habitat, you have to have that submerged aquatic vegetation. In the coral structure, what we got on all these little reef balls, a little hole, almost like a pan muffin size hole, that's used to graft corals on reef balls to grow big. Well, why shouldn't we be looking at what sort of submerged aquatic vegetation we could place in that little thing and maybe graft on the reef ball, so when you drop it down, you have a more complex reef structure because you have vegetation specific to your area. So a lot of this type of stuff comes out in discussion. We got to talk with each other. We got to know what you're thinking. Is the material ideal for you? Will it fit on the base you want to put it on? If you go to Reef Ball Foundation site, you can actually do your core sample. You can identify the structure of that bottom. There's some other tests as far as weight. Down in Louisiana, not too far away, they figured that those monstrous 7 foot high reef balls placed on the marsh out by the outer edge is going to keep it from eroding away. Well, 10 years ago, guess where we were at? We came to the conclusion and presentations that, yeah, you don't have to monitor them. After 2 years, they're gone. They have subsided, but that whole delta subsided. So knowing the structure you're setting on, and whether you're using a sonar system, as we talked about a minute ago, or something modern, core samples still come down to critical thoughts of what's down there. What will be down there? That minute wave action could actually cause more scouring. So while you put a smaller reef on a lighter structure on a kind of soft bottom, I've actually seen over time with reef balls that high in an environment that was kind of mucky and cruddy and sands and all, you get showered. Those micro eddies inside of it and the fish habitat around it and the wave absorption end up scouring the loose particles away, where they all consolidated in the bigger ones that moved on down the shoreline, or were they dissipated? I can tell you that where reef balls have been placed for habitat and wave attenuation along long stretch in particular, where boats go in and out. Marina over there, boat ramp, launch all weekend long, boat after boat. Turbidity horrible. The turbidity is now beautiful. The merged aquatic vegetation returning. Fish swimming in and out of the reef ball. Having small ones, smaller fish, bigger ones, bigger fish. I told Larry, we brought this is cheap, this one's styrofoam, not 150 pounds, right? Even though the new stuff, I don't build them, I built a few, it's hard work. But where Reef Innovations will provide them and ship them all over, with the training, building on site. There are places, in Texas that have built in this past year over 1,500 reef balls that are along the shoreline. Marine environment, it's placed on the site. In that scenario, best get Larry, get the Reef Innovations crew of foremen in that, maybe hire some local laborers to come in, building that quantity of reef balls of that height, not this height. 3 to 4 times higher is really the most efficient way to do it. But it is something you can do. How am I doing on time? Okay. Obviously, I can keep going. So the holes create micro eddies. That's the key. The size structure is important. The fish you're looking for is important. Talking again this morning, I'll point out what's going to be at the base of something that's sitting there at the bottom and the edge. What target fish are we looking at? What would be sitting under a log? The catfish? Yeah, there's some fish that are in there. Some swim in and out. Are we gonna find the bass instead of this one? Now, if you look at my picture out there, you'll see a catfish hanging out that's artistically designed. But yeah, those are the key things. Are we gonna find around it the habitat that's gonna be some invertebrates? More than likely. So this is an entire thing. Don't think one function feature. Think of that structure, multiple sizes, do something big, something small. How the water and waves move around it and what happens is a lot of a factor of how you set that up. I've seen ones that are set up like a horseshoe shape. Waves come in, next thing you know, you've got a sand spit going out on that outside edge. You go the other way, waves come in, they back up more pressure behind it and they wash out around the outer edge. There's thought into where and how you're gonna place them. How deep? They're in as deep as 650 waters off the coast of North Florida, Georgia area, aqualar and coral banks, that's salt water. They're in fresh water 350 foot deep in Europe. They have habitat down there. How do we monitor the habitat? I think we just saw some technology that can help you identify sizes of fish that are there. We need to go in more surveys like that. The hard structure does show up in hard structure. The fish will be monitored. And in most cases, I'm lucky I have springs that I can set something in and look at it and study it. Crystal clear water, community for visibility, makes it easy. Sonar helps in the area to start with water. All right, so any questions? Should I wait for questions later?
We can wait.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you.
I've got a question for Jim while we're working on this.
Now that you've set these in a number of reservoirs over the years, are you seeing a need for different formulations for the concrete to handle the water level fluctuation, or are they weathering it pretty well? Or just seeing a life limitation for the structures?
The closest estimate I can give you for life limitation on any of the restalls is 500 years.
Enable editing.
So you're not
There has
seeing them
been no
degrade too bad.
indication for changes for the
That you can manipulate
They
it.
modified some that are.
Okay, now go to your shared and see if that will show it.
The exposed
Share your screen.
back and forth, so a little bit difference in the mixture there,
Okay,
but the formula is pretty much straight
I do,
across.
try to do.
all right, you're good.
Now, do you need to see me?
Optional, if you want to turn your camera.
Yeah, I have a voice for radio, so definitely so. Wait a minute, well, I've taken up enough time, and I know y'all had a big lunch, so we're gonna jump right in to this, and so thank you for allowing us to share today. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I just had some things come up and couldn't do that. But thanks to technology, I can join you all this way. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share and be a part of what's going on today. So with that said, I'm going to kind of just introduce myself. My name is David King. I'm the founder, the owner, the janitor, the sweeper, parking lot attendant, whatever we need for Mossback. Been doing this for 15 years. Previously to that, I was putting habitat in my home lake and just doing a lot of testing and things like that. So I grew up in Northwest Arkansas on beautiful Beaver Lake. And when I was a kid, the lake filled up faster than they thought, and it was full of standing timber and just a beautiful lake to fish with lots of cover and all those things. And then we moved away for a little bit. And when I came back as an adult and got to fish there, a lot of that, as we see in a lot of our lakes, a lot of that standing timber and habitat was gone. So had the opportunity to buy a house 2 doors down from where I grew up and got to be back out there again and fish and just realize the need for habitat. And that's where I came up with the idea for Mossback, and started out as I was going to be in the fish attractor business. And then it just kind of grew, and through working with a lot of people, agencies, wonderful fisheries biologist. I saw Dave Beasley there. Hey, Dave, going way back, that just really mentored me and helped me see the future of where fish habitat was going. And I'm so thankful for those people that have helped grow our business to where it is today over these 15 years. So with that, as our business has evolved, we've really the last years, just the buzzwords of being environmentally friendly, microplastics and all that has really come to the forefront of our business. And that's where I want to take my time today to just go to that part of our fish habitat business and speak to that. I want to address 3 things today: the why, and the what you will learn, and the benefit to you and your agency group through my presentation today. So the why did we start Mossback Habitat? Why are we addressing all the environmental issues and things like that? We wanted as a company to be the leader in the industry to support and help agencies defend their work and responsibilities to the public in helping aging our new lakes with the use of Mossback Habitat to reach your habitat goals. And then the what I want you to learn today, I'm hoping you'll learn out of this, is what our commitment of sourcing clean materials, our team's dedication to cleaning these materials during the manufacturing process, and the paperwork to back up what we're going to say today in our claims. And then the benefit is we give you every detail of information you need to confidently justify as to why your agency has no reservation in using the artificial habitat produced by mossback fish habitat. So those are my goals today as we move through this, and we're gonna start into this. We realized that where the industry was headed several years ago, and we wanted to get out in front of some things and be the leader in not only having the best habitat, but also the most environmentally friendly habitat. So we saw that we were starting to get lumped into this classification, so to speak, of all plastic habitat and attractors. And we knew we were different, and we needed to start taking immediate steps to separate ourselves from this stigma of plastic habitat. We believe we're the first habitat company to go to the depths that we have taken to prove our product and our practices are environmentally safe. And so we're going to get into some of that today. As we started digging into this and really wanting to find out what we needed to do to be environmentally friendly, to cut down on microplastics and all those things in the industry, we began to do a lot of research. Our team did a deep dive into our products, the materials that we use, our processes. We educated ourselves on the materials that we were using and our processes. And then as we gathered that information, we hired a team of environmental attorneys to help us through that process, to look at everything that we do and all of our materials, and for them to sign off that those materials are okay to be used in bodies of water for fish habitat. So we're going to get into that today in the next few minutes as well. But so here's what we've kind of discovered through all of that, is that not all PVC or HDB is the same. It's important to understand the key difference between rigid PVC and soft PVC. A major distinction lies in the use of phthalates with the plasticizers, which makes PVCs flexible. That's heavily used in the medical industry for small tubes and things like that, for IV tubes and different things like that. So our products are rigid PVC, which we're going to get into here in a minute. And one thing I want to add right here that I think is very important is that all of mossback fish habitat's raw materials that we use, our trunks and our limbs and our bases and shade tops, are all sourced within a few hours drive of our facility in Northwest Arkansas. So I can show up anytime I want, ask to see what they're doing. And that is very important to us, because I've had people over the years say, if you're ever going to make it, and be super profitable, you're going to have to take your product to China. And I will not do that. I need to know what's in it. And I don't trust that. I trust our dealers that we are buying from, our manufacturers. And so that is very important to me, to not have a product that's coming from overseas. So here again, this is what our research has found. And again, we filtered everything we are putting on here through our environmental attorneys, and they sign off on everything that we do. So research shows that rigid PVC does not leach. Lead, PBA, cadmium, and other plasticizers. The industry states that rigid PVC does not produce phthalates, and there's no evidence linking phthalates to properly manufactured rigid PVC habitat in aquatic environments. Our limbs and trunks are crafted from 100% rigid PVC. We worked to improve the materials used in our products until we reached 100% rigid PVC in both our limbs and trunks. We use the same material commonly used in drinking water pipes, and it contains no biocides and supports the quick growth of periphyton on all surfaces. Our bases and shade tops are made from 100% HDPE. They're non-fluorinated, free from phthalates, heavy metals, BPA, and PFAS. So one of the things too, that when we started out down this journey, we set up some goals that we wanted for our company to have and our habitat, excuse me. And that was to reduce microplastics in the environment. And we were very concerned and wanted our product to be that we did not have to tag it as a Prop 65 warning on the product. And we have, through our work and just our team's dedication to sourcing materials, we can proudly say that we are not required to have that on our Mossback products, which we think is a huge, huge benefit to agencies and our customers using our products. So that's kind of it on the materials and where we're at. Each of our manufacturers have to provide us with an MSDS sheet, and they sign that they will stick to that and will not deviate from those materials. And they know also that we are sending that to our environmental attorneys and that they that is checked on. So that's a yearly process that we do. And that allows us to back up what we say and be very transparent in the industry with our materials and our practices that we use at Mossback. So that section just kind of covers our material, and now I want to get into our processes. So a big thing when we started out in this is we wanted to prevent unnecessary plastic waste, microplastics, and anything on our projects that we do. And we meticulously, and I'm going to explain that in a minute, clean all of our PVC remnants from our products before they go into packaging or palletizing. So this is a picture of our raw pipe when it comes in from our manufacturer in the top picture. And then we have a machine that we cut out the V cuts. And you can see there from that, I'm not sure how zoomed in it is on y'all's end, but hopefully you can see the little flecks of plastic that are there. I'm kind of pointing to some, I guess hopefully y'all can see that. And then you can see on the picture in the right where zoomed in there, that's what it looks like when it comes off of our router that produces the V cuts. There are microplastics created. There's no way to keep from it with what we do. But by the time we get to the end, you will see that there are none left on the pipe. So our next phase of that, this kind of the top pictures are left over from the previous page. Our trunk goes through it's a proprietary process that we have. We spent 3 years trying to find a piece of equipment and have it tweaked so that it takes all the sheen and the shine off of the pipe and makes it rough so that all the plant life can get a really, really good foothold into our trunks and get started. It won't wash away in current or being rubbed up against. And it's something we're very proud of. We're the only one in the industry that is doing that, and it makes a huge, huge difference. So you can see after this process in this picture over here, what's left. As you can see, there still are a few, as we call them at the office, hanging chads there. Some of y'all may not be old enough to remember that, but I am. So, anyway, but this is our final step, and you can see we have wire brushes, and I don't want to get into too much detail because some of my competitors, they'll love to know how we do this, but we take it from this top picture with a few little pieces still hanging there into what you see right below that. And there are hardly any left. We have a team that I'm going to show in a minute. And they literally, I don't know how many of you had grandparents or parents that would pick walnuts or pecans back in the day I remember my grandmother sitting there using a pick and picking out little flecks of nuts. And we literally have guys after the final process that checks every V cut inside and out with a little cutter, and he gets the final pieces. So I'm just, I want to really drive that home because that is so important to us that when mossbacks arrive at your job site or they get ready to go into the water, we have done our due diligence to try to get 100% of any microplastic that might be left. Do we get them all? I wish I could sit here and say that we do. There might be a few, but it is minute in comparison to what it could be or what I see a lot of people making homemade habitat, and you see pictures of it and where there's just microplastics all over the ground and still in the product, and that's going to get dumped in the lake. And we do our best to try to make sure that doesn't happen. So here's just a quick kind of a summary of those pictures from the end, with an uncut, cut, step 2, and then our third step, which actually that process roughs up the inside of the trunk as well. And so that also creates a surface that's very friendly to phytoplankton and other things attaching to it, or even minnows possibly laying it, spawning in there. So we just it's so important to us as a company and to me as the owner to make sure that that's what our products look like when they leave our facility. So this is something we recently did is we built a room in our facility. It's completely enclosed. The only openings are, are filtration and things to get air in and out, but it's all done with HEPA filters. And everything that we do is contained within that room. Really can't say what all we do in there to give away some trade secrets, but everything is contained in there as we process our trunks. So this is the final kind of, as I'm wrapping up here, something that's very important. But where you see all the V cuts and all that plastic, and then we have a product that we cut holes, our root wad for the little bait fish and fry, that leaves a small square of plastic pieces. And we take all of that in, we clean our filters, we collect every remnant that comes off of a pipe is collected and bagged and sent back to our manufacturer to be recycled and reused. So that is, and then we get it back again and start the process again. This is our team of guys that just take a lot of pride in getting the trunks cleaned. They understand what's going on. My son is in the middle in the blue. He's been on many installs. Some of them possibly with you guys, and he gets and understands the business and what we're trying to do. So as he leads this team, they know the importance of making sure that pipe is clean when they leave our facility. So this ensures that when you put mossbacks in your body of water, there are no microplastics coming from our processes. So we've covered a lot today. We've gone over a lot of our environmental, the standards that we have set for our company. I know Stephen has shared about his white paper that he put out, and we were excited about that. That helped drive us to some of these things of where we are today. Mossback has signed that paper that we have those practices and adhere to those standards. So we are so proud of that we we are a part of what he has done. but everything can be seen on our website. I don't know if you can read the fine print but that's our find out where or find out why tab. And it will take you to the white paper, to all of the research and everything that we've done so that you can see more about what I'm talking about today. Our products are designed to be long lasting and will not mechanically break down in water, supporting our commitment to sustainability. So the last thing I want to say as we kind of wrap up here is mossback fish habitat. We feel we have the best product, the best practices, the best customer service, and we are transparent and confident what goes out our door and in your bodies of water is safe. So thank you very much for letting me present. Again, I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but I'm thankful for the technology where I could do that.
All right, thank you, David. Any questions for David?
Maybe. I'd just like to say something.
Video's on.
David, this is Doug Nygren, the coordinator for the Reservoir Fish Habitat Partnership.
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I just wanted to let you know how much we appreciate your partnership with us and the generosity that you've provided to our organization over the last few years. So thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause for his donation.
Well, Doug, thank you for what you guys do for fisheries and supporting the agencies and just this industry that we all love and support. And so thank you for sharing that. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Any more questions for our speakers? Yeah, we did it.
We did.
Yeah, okay.
We got some high-tech questions coming.
Yeah, we're gonna do that. We're gonna have Stephen and Rebecca team up now. We're gonna go through the survey questions that Rebecca sent out earlier. Maybe I'm just gonna give Rebecca the phone, the microphone. And take one. All right. Oh, okay.
Hey, David, if you're still on, one thing I would love for you to tell everybody, if they want an MSDS sheet,
Yes.
wants that?
Yes. Yeah, I think, can you see me or no?
Don't worry, we don't need to see you. You can give an email address.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. No, they can contact us. Like I said, one of the things that we want to be very open and transparent with you guys, because here's what we know. We know when y'all are putting in habitat, if it's any artificial habitat, there are environmental people out there that are questioning everything we do or everything you do. And we want to give you the tools. So if you get that email or somebody writes in, you can say, here's why we're using mossback products. And here is the documentation to back up why we made that decision. And we feel safe in that. So you can go on our website or you can call Tracy at our office. You can go on mossbackfishhabitat.com and get her email, but we welcome you to please ask questions. We want to make it easy for you to use our product and for you to feel comfortable using it in your public bodies of water.
Thank you, David. Okay, Rebecca, how do you want to do this?
I say go ahead and just.
You're gonna click through?
I'll click through for you. And
How do they answer?
they will answer on their phone, so get out your phone.
Okay, so everybody, part of this workshop is, we have these partners. And they need to learn a little bit about us. So we developed 10 questions. Rebecca sent them out. It's part of the agenda. She's gonna have the questions. We're gonna go and do something on our phones and see if this works.
So it's menti.com. I'm sorry, I should have put the QR code up there, but I didn't. Menti.com, code 32364453.
So the Wi-Fi is definitely about to go out.
This is just for us, in case we wanna follow up with you and get bags or more details about what you're doing.
Rebecca, I see, something happened in the left corner over there.
Yep.
That's roughly how many people are participating?
Yep.
Awesome. We'll give it a few more seconds.
And I'd say just.
Are you ready?
Anything cool coming in that you wanna talk about, just discuss it as you go.
Great, so you're giving me an open mic and I can say whatever I see coming.
Put our names in.
All right, you gotta put your name in. These don't count as my 10 questions. These are additional questions. Rebecca's throwing the hard ones at you first.
Right, and you should be able to come in late and get through these and catch up with us. But here's the first question.
Okay, first question. How many employees in your agency have the sole responsibility for addressing habitat loss? Your sole responsibility.
Or.
Oh, wait, it says or partial? Oh, it's a two-parter. Rebecca, you're already throwing the hard ones at me. This doesn't say that. This is a point I often make whenever I talk to fish chiefs, is we're taught in school that habitat is like 30% of the equation, right? Like it's people, fish, and habitat. And I always question, why don't we have 30% of our employees solely focused on habitat? How many agencies did we have in the room, Rebecca?
I would have to go back.
All right, I'm gonna call it 10.
We're talking about just reservoir and lakes or stream too.
I think just reservoirs and lakes, because if we talk about streams, that's a little bit different. They're doing channelization and bank stabilization. So maybe we have like 10 agencies, 10 to 12 agencies represented in two full-time only habitat employees.
Yeah, 14 states represented.
14 states and only 2 full-time habitat employees, if that's a sole focus. If I had every fish chief in the room, that's the conversation we need to have right there. Is how do we get somebody who's dedicated statewide to reservoir habitat? All right, can we go to the next question, Rebecca? These are not questions I heard.
Is this for partial? Or
This is partial credit, apparently. Yeah, for partial employees, I guess, like how are you supporting habitat work? Say, do we design the project? Do you physically? There we go. Just a list of all the things you're having to do.
Are these I assume probably ask a question, are these the habitat people specifically or the?
Partial, because we only have 2. That would be a very short list.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Partially.
do you want our
Yeah, within that.
habitat duties or all of our other duties?
Habitat related duties that we have to do. So then if I had these same fish chiefs in the room, I'd say, these are the things that a full employee would need to be tasked with, and that's a full-time. I love some of these, like the ones that we don't think about, the volunteer engagement, just dealing with the public and getting them engaged on a project. The budgeting side, like some of these are so not what we're taught in when we're getting a degree in fisheries. A lot of it's, people management, budget management. There's some of them that I see mapping redundant there, like some of the partners that we learned from today that we can be utilizing, maybe make our job easier. Okay, Rebecca, next one. Does your agency have the necessary equipment to assist with habitat projects? If so, what equipment is available? And so to physically move habitat.
It's here.
I think a good follow-up when we think about this is, does this equipment solely live in the fisheries division, or is this something we can borrow if it's convenient for the rest of the agency?
So, Stephen,
Yes,
is this also pertaining to the habitat program specifically?
yeah, I want it to the habitat program specifically, everything that we. Okay, fine. Once again, the caveat is asterisk, maybe I can borrow it. But it's gonna be difficult. This is great, because somebody like me, I could take this and one of our partners at Major League Fishing is Kubota. I could take this to Kubota and say, can we solve this issue? Right? So remember a lot of this that we're answering these questions. It's fun for us because we're gonna joke about it. But our partners in the room can learn from us. Rebecca, next question. Okay, what other equipment is available? So I think this is where we were gonna hit what Mike Homer just said, like, well, what does the agency have that we could probably use? Or what would be, maybe we could even say what would be really important for us to get. If we're gonna build a partnership, what is the piece of equipment that we need to get? I like the one earbuds.
Yeah.
Kind of move so I can actually see all these. Reading them sideways is difficult. Drones. More attachments for our equipment, yeah. Do you physically scroll down or does it itself?
Yep.
Awesome. See more drones. I don't see anybody putting like forward facing sonar. Oh, there we go. Something to monitor as habitat is being deployed and what is happening. Something to celebrate. Thanks, Tom Lane. Did you declare your age? If you know a guy, you know a guy. All right, Rebecca, next one. Okay, wait, before you do this, specific to habitat. Habitat boats, barges, how many does your agency have? And remember, we collected agency earlier, so we can look at that, and if we have a barge partner someday, we can kind of target the agencies that are lacking. Specific to the habitat program, so Texas, you get the answer of one. It's right outside, it's not being used today at all. So hold the parking lot down. Can I ask which agency wrote 10? Arkansas. Jeremy, real quick, how does every district have a barge? So Arkansas, every district has barge. That's the whole standard. Like, that's where we gotta be. All right, Rebecca, next one. Okay, for biobase or other mapping, what topographic mapping units are available? So do you have something that you're doing pre or post assessment of habitat with some sort of mapping? This really helps a company like Biobase right now because they use Lorentz's platform, right? And what they need to see from us right now is that we all don't have Lorentz. So for agencies to be able to use some of the technology, we gotta be able to use what we have. Okay, Rebecca, next one. This one will be a fun one. What's your primary source for funding for habitat work? Just the primary source. Where's the majority of the money come from?
Primary.
Thank you. Good job, Utah. Perfect. And somebody got the core to donate that. That probably took a lot of work. Becca, next one. Okay, what is done by your agency versus your independent contractors? We're talking about how does that work? This is actually more split than I thought it would be.
We probably should follow this up with different types of habitat work.
So we can,
Things like earth moving can have to contract out.
it's very good. So just to follow up on what Rebecca said, like show of hands, how many of you, if it's because of earth moving that you're using the independent contractor? If you excluded earth moving, it would be all within the agency. Rebecca says earth moving is the only reason. Okay. I'm seeing like some head shaking in Texas as well. Okay, all right, next one, Rebecca. Okay, what percentage of the habitat materials, we probably are meaning like artificial or reef ball or something like that we're putting in are being made by the staff versus purchased from a commercial source? I wonder how this has changed over time too. I think this is more skewed towards commercial source than I expected, but this is.
We used to build a lot of stuff. Found that most of our stuff was at the stage where we wanted it to stay.
Yeah.
And English had a bigger issue with snagging or whatever it was. And so that's one of the reasons we started looking for a rental site.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I like what David was saying about the process they're going through, and he ended with that slide. It was talking about how much they care and that they expect the same from us. I think whenever we look at our homemade or in agency made habitat, like, are we going through the same steps that the commercial partners are? Because we definitely gonna have to hold ourselves accountable to what we're asking them to be accountable to. Rebecca, next. Okay, have you personally completed a shoreline stabilization project? We're about to go walk one and see one. I know that Tom and I can attest that was a challenge. It's a challenge to make them look and feel good, Todd. Get them to where they're not wavy. To actually pick the right material. All right, we're gonna be real close to 50-50 here. Yeah, okay, perfect. We'll just stop there, right? What about sediment removal projects? Have you personally completed one of those? And this one's gonna probably help guide us in future workshops. What do we need to make sure that we're learning from each other more often? A resounding no. I wish we had a follow-up on that one that said, do you want to?
Hey, Ben. North Carolina doesn't own any of the main.
Right.
We don't really own any of that, so we're not.
So it's not your problem.
It's not our problem. But it's not something we have control.
Yeah. Well, there's the other follow-up, or who can we even participate? And,
We would participate in permitting.
there you go.
16 of the 18, plastic permit is second.
And then waiting on the court. Yeah, waiting for it. Let's see, what's the next one?
Have you personally,
Yeah.
or has your agents?
I would say you personally,
Okay.
as an attendee here,
So
do you have that knowledge base?
it might be biased though, for a lot of us that are administrative level,
Fair.
right?
Okay.
So we don't have our on ground people who have personally done this, but we have done it.
Okay, so next time we'll write, have you approved of somebody? Got it, got it. All right, what about nutrient mitigation? Oh, there's the QR code. All right, so we'll collect all those things. If you need to answer one, please do. We'll collect all that. If it's helpful to a partner and they ask us specific questions, now we have a database to start from. Thank you. Doug, you're up again.